We'll call our meeting to order tonight. Nada, if you would do the roll call, please.
Ittinger?
Here.
McEvers?
Here.
Gookin?
Yep.
Miller?
Here.
English?
Yes.
Evans?
We will rise for the invocation. We have Pastor Craig Sume from the First Presbyterian Church here with us tonight.
Gracious and merciful God, we thank you for resources, for the gifts that you give us to be a people in community in this place. And we ask, oh God, that you would give wisdom to these men and women as they steward and care and exercise their authority over these resources, land and property and water and all of the many gifts that you have given us. Lord, we pray for those who are on the line of fire in this state and in surrounding states. Keep all of them safe as they protect property, as they protect wildlife. And for those, even in our community, who are affected by the fires, by the smoke, whose health has been in danger over the last several days, we pray your protection and your care for them. Lord, as we are a community together filled with people of passion, we also pray that you would bring us unity, that you would bring us into dialogue that is careful, that is considerate, and is compassionate. We pray it in your name. Amen.
Amen. Woody, lead us in the pledge, please.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I did want to tell everyone in attendance that we do have 3 public hearings that will be at the end of the agenda. So there are some sign-up sheets over there. Anyone wishing to give testimony or weigh in, make sure that you sign up on the sign-in sheets that are over near the entrance there. So we do not have any amendments to the agenda tonight, so we'll go to the presentations, and we have Mike Anderson, our wastewater superintendent, is going to give us an update in regards to construction. Welcome, Mike.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor and Council. I'm pleased to bring to you tonight an update to our construction project that's going on at the wastewater treatment plant. So just a very brief history, because everybody up here knows what's going on, I believe. The reasoning behind this upgrade to the treatment facility was permit limitations and increased permit limitations that were imposed on our plant, reducing the amount of pollution we were allowed to discharge into the river. This construction involved 2 phases, or 2 phases, and in this second phase, we are increasing our total tertiary treatment from 1 million gallons to 5 million gallons. And we're also adding a redundant primary clarifier and secondary clarifier. So it wasn't just tertiary treatment, it was also primary and secondary treatment. So far, our accomplishments, we have the tertiary treatment facility has gone online. We've completed construction of all our current build out on this phase of the tertiary treatment. So all of our flow daily is going and receiving tertiary treatment. Both of our primary and secondary clarifiers have been put in the ground, at least, and we're about 85% completed with this phase of the project. I'm showing you here the tertiary treatment on the left, and that was a year ago, 2017, this last summer, and you can see those empty cells off there to the show you here. These empty cells here are those what we call trains. Those are all empty. They were constructed in phase 1, but weren't put into play. They weren't put in service. They have now been filled, and all the associated pumping and everything else has been put in place. So now they're receiving flow, and we can treat up to 6 million gallons of water through there, which we're treating about, we usually get about 4 million, 3.5 to 4 million gallons every day, but it's all receiving this tertiary treatment. And I hope this shows up clearly enough in this light, but the goal of it was to remove phosphorus and ammonia. We're trying to remove these nutrients from our wastewater to protect the receiving water, the Spokane River, down to the lake, and on the Washington side. Phosphorus and ammonia are nutrients, same thing you put on your lawn. We're trying to keep it out of the water. So I think this graph clearly demonstrates that this is the calendar year, 2018, and you can see up here, these are trends for both phosphorus and ammonia, and more or less right about here is where we put it online. So very pleased to see just how well that tertiary treatment's working, and we are in some instances below the detectable limits of measuring for these nutrients. So very pleased with the way that's working out so far.
What's the measurement on the vertical side?
Well, there's two axes, I apologize. So on the left, that's milligrams per liter. That's in blue. So that's 10, 20, 30 milligrams per liter. And on the right, this is two axes. On the right, that's micrograms per liter.
Wow.
And that's measuring the phosphorus, total phosphorus. So an update on the other two aspects that I mentioned. Primary clarifier number 3, a year ago on the left, was barely a hole in the ground. On the right, you can see currently we've now got that clarifier in place. These are the primary clarifiers that run right along the road there that leads out to the college. So those, we've got roofs on them in place for both aesthetics as well as odor control reasons. And you can see that roof is not totally on, but the framework has gone on, and we're pretty close to completing that roof on that. And I'll get to some other issues with that, or not issues, but forthcoming items that need to occur with it. And the secondary clarifier 3 was a similar situation. That's really a big hole you see on the left here. That's just shoring. That's actually not a clarifier. What you see around there is shoring because we're in such limited space. And on the right, you can see what it looks like now. So we've got our clarifier in place. Neither that clarifier nor the primary clarifier are in service yet, but they are in place. So that's our next step. What do we still have yet to do? We need to install the piping, pumping, all the electrical connections to physically connect those clarifiers up with the rest of the stream of water. And I've got some decent photos for you on that. On the left, you can see just kind of what we're working with here. Bear in mind that this facility has been in service in some form or fashion for 80 years or so. So we're trying to dig in, and this is kind of what you're looking at. If I may try to explain this. On this picture on the left, where I'm circling, this is the new primary clarifier. And all the flow has to come from this area, snaking through here, into here, and then snaking around and back that direction. And from the profile perspective, we've dug a hole, and you could see all this pipe work is normally underground. So we're trying to put a 30-inch pipe through all that. Hasn't been very easy. When you start digging holes, you expect something to be somewhere, and it's not always where you expect it to be. So we're dealing with that, and couldn't ask for a better crew doing the digging. I tell you this, they're fantastic at what they do. When I watch these guys do their work, they really are wonderful. So that's where we're at. We've got those clarifiers in place. We just need to connect everything up to them, both electrically and all this plumbing and everything that needs to be installed on it. Briefly, to get into the numbers a little bit. So our funding source for this project, we're receiving a large lion's share of funding through SRF. That's the State Revolving Fund. It's a loan that we're getting through the state. Originally, it was a $20 million loan to fund this. We have since gotten a loan amendment of $500,000 back earlier this year, and that was to cover a bridge gantry crane to help service those membranes, as you'll recall. So that's our total loan funding is $20,500,000. And our costs break down into two general categories, construction and engineering. The agreement with Apollo, that's our general contractor. It's just a little over 16 million. And the engineering service, construction services are a little over 2 million. We will be bringing forward 2 change orders, predicted 2 change orders. One of them in a relatively short amount of time. That would be, you already approved the loan funding as well as the engineering for this bridge crane, but we're going to bring a change order forward for the actual costs of the bridge crane. We'll bring that change order to you shortly. And then another change order, second change order, nearing the end of the project that encompasses all of the small changes that we've had to make during the project. For example, when we dig big holes in the ground and we think one pipe is going one way and it's not, and it may cost us a little extra, those are the kind of change orders that we're going to bring forward to you. And that is the end of that. I will take any questions you have on our project.
Thank you. Woody?
So 2 questions.
Yes.
So you said the capacity of the plant is going to be at 6 million
For
gallons?
the tertiary treatment, we'll be at 6 million, yes.
And then you said we're running 3 to 4 right now? Mm-hmm. So build out, will we be able to handle the sewer?
Yes.
Will we be able to handle 6 million gallons?
Yes, we will be able to handle 6 million gallons through there. Keep in mind, it's not instantaneous flow, so it sort of gets buffered through all these different tanks. Throughout the day, we'll get more flow than 6 million gallons at a time. It peaks up when everybody wakes up and takes their showers, but the entire system capacity sort of absorbs that like a spring. So by the time it gets to the tertiary treatment, it's more of a level, stable flow.
And the clarifier, what's a clarifier do again?
So the primary clarifier and secondary clarifiers, if you think of those are stages of treatment, primary, secondary, and then the tertiary is the membranes. Their job is to settle things. They're really just, we like to keep flow moving through all the pipes at a certain speed. We don't want things to settle in the pipes. We do want it to settle, and that first one would be the primary clarifier. And we want all the solids, as many of the solids as we can, to settle right there. So we slow it down to a speed wherein everything that can settle will settle in that primary clarifier. Numbers-wise, if we receive in 300 or so milligrams per liter of solids going into our plant, 300 is the number, just the number we more or less get. Coming out of that primary clarifier, we're down to 100. So we've settled out 2/3 already of our solids. All the flow just slows down, everything heavy sinks, the water stays on top and flows out of the top. Through the secondary clarifier, it's a very similar process, except upstream of that, we do some biological treatment. Little bugs, we call them bugs, will digest that remaining 100. They'll start chewing on it. It's not going to want to settle on its own, so they'll start chewing on all that remaining 100. They get nice, fat, happy. They sink to the bottom, and that's how we get rid of that solids. Coming out of the secondaries, we're down to 3 to 5 or so. So we came into the plant at 300. Out of those primaries, we're down to 100. At the secondaries, we're down to 5 maybe. And then out of the tertiary system, once we go through the membrane, we're at 0. Yeah. We have 0 solids since we've put it online. As measured legally by the standard methods. In reality, if we could measure down that fall, there's got to be something, but we're not able to detect anything.
Thanks.
Well, I had somewhat the same question as Woody of the, I'm glad to hear that we've got, it sounds like, some excess capacity. In my experience, a lot of times in government kind of work and projects, as we have competing priorities between do it for the cheapest now, and then about a month from now, we get the criticism that, why didn't you think ahead and build, a little extra room? So if we're using roughly, it sounds like about 2/3 of capacity, is there a figure of, gee, if we're at a little over 50,000 population now, is it calculated on that would take us to 75,000 or something? Or how would you define that excess capacity potential?
So traditionally, capacity is measured through gallons. And lately, we're finding we can't really measure by gallons.
Liters.
Not in America. We will measure not just in gallons, but in amount of solids. We're finding that with, because of the population that's served here in the city of Coeur d'Alene, it's mostly residential with commercial. There's very little industry. So all of the low-flow shower heads, all of the dishwashers and the clothes washing machines that are really energy efficient and water efficient have reduced the amount of flow coming into our plant. So we're finding that the hydraulic capacity of the water, the amount of water that we can push through this plant, we are very comfortable with it right now. I can tell you that. It's the solids that's increasing as our population increases. So our population increases and our flows are remaining pretty steady because everybody's putting out less flow, but they're still putting out the same amount of solids. So that's something that we'll have to cross. But we don't foresee any immediate need to increase capacities of any of these stages of treatment. Some things will need to be refitted. You know, some items, our grit removal is 40 years old. Things like that will need to be looked at, but not for capacity reasons. Just to, as you mentioned, if I may, kind of taking care of things while you can when it's cheaper. If you look at this picture that I brought up here on the right, all of this is normally underground. So the time to repair it would be now. So that's some of the things we're looking at. There was a leak, and one of these is an airline, and one of those airlines is leaking. It's much cheaper to do it now while it's exposed, even though it wasn't part of the original plan. Now's the time to do it. So that's what we're looking at, taking advantage of those circumstances.
Good.
Any other questions for Mike? Kiki?
So this was initially started because of the TMDL requirements by permit. So is that graph telling us that you've been inspected and we're well under those limits now?
We haven't been inspected, but yes, we measure those daily and see exactly how much we're putting out. And yes, that graph is telling us that currently we're not required to meet those numbers actually until 2022. We have to have 2 years worth of data by 2024. So we're currently meeting the numbers we have to meet in 2024. The reason that this was designed and planned and said, let's put this forward and it's designed to meet those goals, we are meeting them.
We're early.
Yep.
Good. And then the other thing is you mentioned this change order coming, this balancing change order. Was that the $300,000 or are you anticipating an additional amount on top of that you'll need to come back to?
These are estimates. I only wanted to throw them up there so you know what's possibly coming. But yes, that change order number 2 is going to be all that pipe.
Okay.
That the air needs to be looked at and things like that.
Okay.
That's going to be included in that. So all these small ones, rather than coming to you 60 times for this project, we're putting them in one and giving you one change order. But once we do bring those, I just wanted this to be sort of a 30,000-foot flyover of how the project is looking. I would very much encourage you to, if you have some questions specific to those change orders, I'm going to give you some detail right now, but we're definitely going to be bringing those change orders to you so we can delve into some of those financials at that time.
Those would probably come to Public Works or something.
Yeah,
first,
yes,
or-
yeah.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions? Ron?
When will this project be done?
Never.
Oh, really? Next year. It will be done next year, probably in the springtime, we're hoping, for completion by springtime.
Okay.
That's a little bit later than we anticipated, but we had some delays in ordering and just getting parts from different vendors.
Great, Mike. Thank you very much. Appreciate the
pleasure.
update. We'll move on to the public comment portion of this. Anyone wishing to come in and address the council would have 3 minutes to do so on city business. Now, if you're here for any of the public hearings, there's going to be an opportunity at each public hearing to address that specific one. So this is just if someone has a general public comment on anything else, they're welcome to come up, but there will be an opportunity down the road for something specific. So if you'd like to come up, come on up.
My name is Mary Smith, I sent a letter to you, Mayor Widmeyer, and then also the same letter to the city council members, and also to 2030, and also, I hope to the building thing. And it's about changing the building codes, which have not been changed since 2005. As a citizen and a wonderful lover of Coeur d'Alene and Lake Coeur d'Alene, I wonder why the codes have not been changed. I am concerned about the city of Coeur d'Alene becoming like and looking like the Miami shoreline or the Chicago shoreline with high rises. And also about the high rises obstructing people's views. I am not a resident, and I am not a investor in the new building at First and Lakeside, but I do feel sorry for the people behind there whose views have been obstructed by that building. And so I think there is a need, unless the goals of Coeur d'Alene are different than I would suspect, for the building code to be changed and to reduce the height of buildings here in Coeur d'Alene. I think it would promote the satisfaction of the citizens of Coeur d'Alene to know that tall buildings are not going to obstruct their view of Tubbs Hill or of the lake. I know that increased services will be required, especially by the fire department, to have ladders that will reach into high rises and to equip their trucks to facilitate fires there. Also, I think that the value of properties around high rises will decrease because nobody wants to sit or close to a high-rise building. I think that I was a member of 2030 for a while, and we wanted to maintain the charm and uniqueness of downtown. And I think if high-rises are done, that they should be relegated to the edges of Coeur d'Alene and into industrial areas or perhaps into college campuses. I don't think they would obstruct people's views there, and I think that's where they belong. And I think you as a council, if you do put a limit on heights and say no to builders who come in and say want to reap a gold mine here, but who profit nothing to Coeur d'Alene, I think that you would be respected for doing that. And I think also that the residents of Coeur d'Alene would respect you, that you were not being, and I'm not saying that you were bribed, that you were influenced, or that prestigious or political groups did that to you. But I'm just recommending to you that you take a serious look at the building code. Thank you.
Thank you. Wait, no, okay. You know, I'm gonna have to ask. We're gonna get into a public hearing. You can go ahead and sit down, but there's not going to be any applause, or there's not going to be any booing here tonight. I was told that at the last Planning Commission meeting that there were, with one of the issues that were here that we're going to address tonight, that there was applause and booing, and that's not something that we want to get into. We want to refrain from that. We want to just move forward and have a professional meeting. So I'm just going to ask you to refrain from the applause and any booing tonight, and we can have a great, productive meeting tonight. So anyone else wishing to give public comment tonight? Just general public comment? All right, we'll move on to announcements. Any member of the council have an announcement? Kiki.
I have a couple. Amy Evans actually asked me to read this. She couldn't be here tonight and wanted to let the public know that they're encouraged to come down to City Hall and vote on their choice for the Celtice Way roundabout art. There are maquettes on display at City Hall through August 31st, and they will be at the library until September 10th, so come out and choose your choice for what will happen in the center of those roundabouts. Also, there are openings and need for service on the Arts Commission, so anyone who would like to apply for a position there, they can see Amy Ferguson at the City Hall. And the other item was I attended the Ignite board meeting the other day, and the Performing Arts feasibility study draft was presented. They concluded that with a 3 to 4 week open comment period. The information on that draft is linked to the Ignite website as well as the CDA 2030 website. So any input after reviewing that citizens have that they'd like to get back to that consultant before the feasibility study on a performing arts facility is concluded can be forwarded to either of those organizations.
Thank you. Any other member of the council have an announcement?
Mr. Mayor.
Dan?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So just wanted to say, Dan and the mayor and I were at Earl Hyde's 100th birthday today, World War II veteran in the Battle of the Bulge. That was really something. It was good to see him. It'll probably be in the paper tomorrow, so you'll be able to read more details about that. Also, wanted to let everyone know, pretty soon you may be seeing this notice on your blue recycling bin. And what this will indicate is that there are items that have been found in your recycling bin that cannot be recycled. And this has been coming up, but it's been not made public as much as it really could be, is anything ever. So if you receive this tag or something like this on your blue recycling bin, it means that you have a contamination in the bin. And you can go to our city website, cdaid.org/recycle, to have a list of allowable recycling materials. You can also visit the vendor's website at cdagarbage.com. And yeah, and so this is going to be happening soon. So we're bracing ourselves for it. Yeah, look forward to that. Also, Mr. Mayor, I have a question. So we had Mary Smith come up and talk about height restrictions downtown. How would that be implemented? I mean, what would the process be if that was something that council was interested in?
It would be something that would start in the planning department, then go through the planning commission and make its way through there. I think that might be something that they're addressing currently in the comp plan. Sean, you can say, just nod your head yes or no if that's part of something that he's saying yes, that they're looking at the comp plan. So the comp plan is a couple-year process. They're going through it and making a lot of adjustments and looking at recommendations for building codes, and building heights would be part of that.
And the comp plan is a public process?
Yes.
I guess. So that will be, Mary, if you're writing this down, there will probably be a meeting at some point in time, and I guess that'll be on the city's webpage, or I have your email. I could always let you know when that's coming up. Thank you.
All right, we will move on now to the consent calendar.
Mr. Mayor, I would like to move for approval of the consent calendar as presented, including Resolution 18-044.
Second?
Motion and a second. Any further discussion? Roll call, please. Renata?
Eddinger,
Yep.
Miller,
Yes?
McEvers,
Yes.
Gookin,
Yeah.
English.
Yes.
Motion carried. We'll move on to other business. This is resolution number 18-045, proposed amendment to the fiscal year 2017-18 budget and scheduling a public hearing for September 18th of 2018. Bonnie.
Mayor Whitmire, council members, and honored guests. Tonight I'm asking for approval for resolution 18-045 to amend the 2017-18 budget ordinance by a total of $13,226,000. So this dollar is a large amount for an amendment. Last year our amendment was $5.8 million, and that was actually a large one due to the GO bond carryover that we had that year. The year before it was $2.6 million. So this is a fairly large amendment. So let's talk about the revenues, where the revenues are coming for this amendment. There's additional revenues in here from building permits and miscellaneous things of $647,000. This little graph kind of shows you where most of this is coming from. The designated fund balance is about $1 million of this, and that's for carryovers from the GO bonds, the fire station number 4, and City Hall, the City Hall remodel. There's $173,000 in here coming from the undesignated fund balance, and $193,000 from transfers into the general fund. And then the large one is $7.7 million that's coming from the wastewater cap fee fund. So that's where the money's coming from. Here's where the expenses are. There's $64,000, $65,000-ish in police department grants. There's the 3 larger carryovers, the GO bonds, Fire Station 4, the City Hall remodel. Some miscellaneous carryovers, which are the lighting at Sunset Park, which we've had the money for a while, it just hadn't gotten done. Overlay of 51,000 and a couple other small ones. Now, the big amendment in here is the 8.3 million for the mill site purchase, the earthworks, and the fill. So that's what we have in this budget anticipating to be spent for that project. Constant manning and retirement payouts, 177. There's a traffic study in here for the Atlas Mill site of 43,900, which would come from the impact fees. And then it transfers to the street lighting fund of 30,000. This next slide is just a graph of those. If you have any questions at any time, please stop me. Otherwise, I'll go through this pretty quick. The other funds that have amendments in them, the library fund has some grants and computers, about 39,000 included in this amendment. The street lighting fund is 36,000 for the LEDs that we are relighting as we get through the city to redo that. We have a transfer in here from the impact fee funds for the mill site traffic study. The big one, and this one is $2 million for Memorial Park. This includes the park, the signal, some drainage improvements, the restroom, and trail realignment. There's also in here from the parking fund, 471,000 for the Garden Avenue shared use lot, equipment for the new parking garage. There is a sanitation fund transfer for streetwear that was increased this year. 45,000 also from the parking fund for the ambassador program, which came from a $1 increase to the fees at Independence Point. Skateboard park of 50,000, which is being funded by Ignite. And Centennial Trail Grant, 147,000 of that is coming from the state, 50,000 from the county, and the city's contribution to that is 12,000. And we have a little graph on that one. And then here's a graph on your fund balance and how it has moved. And if you'll notice in 17-18, I actually don't have a number in there. I was going to estimate that from our amendment. And when I did that, I discovered that your fund balance would be very low if we were to leave all of the mill site expenses in the general fund. So what I'd like to do when I bring that ordinance back to you in September is to remove all of those expenses from the general fund and put them in a separate capital project fund. And then we'll change the amendments to that capital project fund as opposed to the general fund. Otherwise, what happens is your fund balance goes way down in the general fund, and it's going to be really hard to know what's in there with all of that other things going on in there. So that is I didn't get through that before I had to have this all in the council packet, so that will change a little bit from here to the ordinance, but it should work out well, and then we can estimate where your fund balance will end up at the end of the year. Plus, we'll be closer to the end of the year by then, too, so it'll make it a better estimate. So that is all I have. If you have any questions.
Bonnie, if you could back up 3 slides. Right there. And we want to talk about the Memorial Park, that 2.1 million, and then the parking. Those are 2 items that are paid for by Ignite and the county, correct?
Yes. So the, let's see if I can find this one. The county, so the shared use parking lot, the county is paying for that. Ignite is paying for the park portion of it and the restrooms. As far as anything in the parking fund for the Memorial parking lot, that's all coming from the county. And then there's a small amount coming from Parks Capital for the park, but most of it's coming from Ignite and from the county.
So although those are shown as additional expenses, you need to show them as expenses, but they're being reimbursed from other funds.
Yeah, there will be revenue on the other side of that, yes.
Okay.
We just have to have the authority, the spending authority to, because it will all end up as an expense in our budget.
Right, okay. Other questions for Vonnie Kiki?
Vonnie, is the Memorial Field grandstand rebuild in this year?
I don't believe we'll have that going this year, so we'll probably have to amend it for next year because it's not in next year's budget either. So a year from now, we'll probably be coming back with that one in here.
And then when you're talking about pulling the Atlas Fund out, that will have some of these, like the mill site study and some of these pulled into that separate account that have already occurred?
Yeah.
Okay.
And then I won't have to amend the general fund. I'll be amending the capital projects fund for that. It'll still be the same bottom line
Right.
dollar amount, but
But it'll separate it
Yeah, yeah.
for stuff that's already been done. Okay.
Any other questions for Vonnie? If there aren't any other questions, we'll be looking for council action.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to approve, make a motion to approve Resolution 18045.
Second?
Motion and a second. Any further discussion? Roll call, please, Renata.
Miller,
Yes?
McEvers,
Yes.
Gookin,
Yeah.
English,
Yes?
Eddinger.
Motion carried. Thank you, Vonnie. We will move on to resolution number 18-046, approval of the collective bargaining agreement with the Police Association, Troy Tymason.
Good evening. Yes, we have 3 bargaining groups that we are currently working with this fiscal year. This will be the first agreement to come forward with the Police Association. This agreement, as proposed, is a 3-year contract. We met with our colleagues in the Police Association 10 or 11 times to bring this together. Again, a 3-year contract. Included in this contract was a significant change to the medical. It was talked about a great deal, and they agreed to have an increase from 5% for dependent care coverage to 10%. That's a doubling. We negotiated a military leave benefit in this contract. We worked diligently on the expense reimbursement for travel and are proposing to move that to a per diem. We have an increase for the power shift. It went up 75 cents per hour, and the graveyard shift moved from 50 cents to $2.25 per hour. We have a proposal in this 3-year contract to increase investigative assignment pay, 75 cents per hour. In this contract, we recognize the challenge that nearly every city in the United States has in hiring police to work for the cities and/or counties and/or state agencies. So we worked a great amount on moving the sworn officer pay range that currently is at 9 years. In this proposal, it moves to 5 years. We have worked on a cost of living adjustment for the 3 years. That would be equal to 2.5% per year. And recognizing the fact that it is a 3-year contract and that the city has struggled with having a full complement of police officers as per your budget, we have put a 1% annual increase in for all sworn police officers in this contract. So again, there was a good amount of work done on this. There was a lot of cleanup done in this particular 30-page agreement, and we have brought it forward for you to look at, and I would stand for any questions.
Questions for Troy? All that work we put into it, and they have no questions.
Well, you've kept us abreast, right?
And I would thank Mayor Widmeyer for being at all of those meetings as well.
Ron, did you have something?
I did too.
Well, I just want to make a resolution.
Oh, okay. Well, Kiki might have had a question here, so we'll have Kiki.
Troy, just 2 things. Were the previous contracts 3-year terms?
Previous. So we have amended contracts. We've lengthened those contracts. The rationale for this is twofold. One, we understand that negotiating 3 contracts in 1 year is not our goal, so we worked real hard to stagger the contracts. If all goes well, you will not see one coming back that has a 3-year term on it from the other 2 groups. And then the second one is the fact that this police business is really, really the core value that the city of Coeur d'Alene has in public safety. And we're working really hard on laterals. You'll see some really good language in here on laterals. And they wanted to go with a 3-year contract to see if we can't get fully staffed and get over this hump, possibly in the hiring and the recruitment of great officers.
Okay,
So it's varied in the past, to answer your question.
thank you.
Okay, anyone else have any questions? I just wanted to thank Troy and Melissa Tosi for her work on this. Captain Dave Hagar was involved at every meeting, and also the president of the association, Johann Schmitz, and all the other members of the association. It was a back and forth deal. How many meetings, Troy? 10, 11? It was a lot of meetings that we went back and forth, but I think we have a good agreement for everyone involved. So if there are no other questions, be looking at a motion.
Mr. Mayor, I move for resolution 18-046, approval of collective bargaining agreement with the Police Association.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Did you catch the second there, Renata? I think we had a couple
I caught it as Miller.
Okay, a couple simultaneous ones. Any further discussion?
Just, Mr. Mayor, I'm very, very happy to support our police department. I think they've done a terrific job. The department has come such a long way in the 6 years that I've been here, and I get compliments from police all the time about how responsive they are, catching the bad guys, keeping crime down 16%, pulling over people who run stop signs. That's a good one. So, so I'm very happy to support our police and give them a fighting chance when it comes to keeping them here, which is our biggest problem, is we're going to lose good guys. We've lost good guys in the past, so hopefully this helps keep our good guys here.
All right. Any further discussion?
I got a question.
Okay.
Troy, how you doing on with the other two groups?
We are working on the final details of fire. You will see that at your next council meeting. And we have 4 meetings in with the Lake City Employees Association and meet with them again next week. That's going well. So ideally, we'd have that done before October. So we'll see what we can do in the next 10 days.
Okay.
All right. So roll call, please, Renata.
Miller,
Yes?
McEvers,
Yes.
Gookin,
Yeah.
English,
Yes.
Ettinger.
Yep.
Motion carried. Thank you, Troy. Now we'll move on to our public hearings. Our first public hearing is A-1-18. This is a proposed 1.22 acre annexation from agricultural suburban to R17 zoning for 2400 North 15th Street. Applicant is Aspen Homes and Development. Does any member of the council have a conflict of interest in this matter? Seeing none, we will move forward, and we have Tammy Stroud going to give the report.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. So again, this is the request for an annexation from County Agricultural Suburban to City R17. Applicant is Aspen Homes. The request is R17 for a 1.22 acre parcel near the intersection of 15th Street and Best Avenue. Currently, there is a single-family residence and accessory storage structure, and they are the only 2 uses on the property. And there is a mixture of other uses surrounding the property, and I'll get to that when I speak to the zoning. So this is Best Avenue and 15th Street, and this outlined in the yellow is the subject property. This is the exhibit submitted by the applicant showing the subject property here on the annexation exhibit. And this information provided in your staff report outlines the R17 zoning district and what's allowed as far as intended uses and the district's description. Finding B8, that this proposal is or is not in conformance with the comprehensive plan policies, and this subject property does lie within the stable established Northeast Prairie area within the comprehensive plan. And this is the location on our comprehensive plan map. And it's described as these areas where the character of the neighborhoods has largely been established and in general should be maintained. The street network, the number of building lots, and general land use are not expected to change greatly within the planning period, and that's stable established. This describes Northeast Prairie today. And I'll read the description on Northeast Prairie tomorrow. It's typically a stable established housing area with a mix of zoning districts. The majority of the area has been developed with special care, Special care should be given to the areas that remain, such as Nettleton Gulch area, protecting the beauty and the value of the hillside and wetlands. And the characteristics of the Northeast Prairie neighborhood are described in your staff report, and it does speak to a variety of zoning districts. And again, they're asking for R17. The objectives within your comp plan, there are a few listed in your staff report, and it's on page 11. That public facilities and utilities are or are not available and adequate for the proposed use. As far as stormwater, it will be addressed at the time of development, when city staff takes a look at the proposed project and makes that determination on how that should be handled. Streets, as far as that, the subject site has frontage along the east side of 15th Street. Any necessary improvements to the site would be addressed during the subdivision and/or site development process. The Streets and Engineering Department has no obligation or has no objection to the annexation as proposed, and that was submitted by Chris Bosley, city engineer. As far as water, the property for the proposed annexation lies within the City of Coeur d'Alene water service area, and there is sufficient capacity within the public water system to provide adequate domestic irrigation and fire flow service to the subject parcel. And any proposed development of the parcel will require the extension of the public water utilities at the owner's or the developer's expense. Nearest public sanitary sewer is located within the Ramsey Road border. Subject is located within the Ramsey Road, which borders the easterly boundary of the annexation, in accordance with the 2013 Sewer Master Plan.
I don't think that's correct.
Ramsey?
Oh, excuse me, I guess we've got a little wrong street. So 15th Street.
No one's copying
Yes.
and pasting at wastewater, are they?
Good catch. The nearest public sanitary sewer is located within the 15th Street right-of-way, which borders the western boundary of the subject property. The subject property is within the City of Coeur d'Alene area of city impact and in accordance with the 2013 Master Plan. And the city's wastewater utility presently does have the wastewater system capacity and willingness to serve the annexation as requested. And then as far as the fire department, they do work with engineering, water, and building departments to ensure the design of any proposal meets mandated safety requirements. And they would address their concerns on site at the time of building permit submittal or any subdivision proposal. Finding B10, that the physical characteristics of the site make or do not make it suitable for the request at this time. As shown in the following photos, this subject property is flat with no physical constraints. And this is looking southeast along 15th Street. And again, looking southeast toward the subject property along 15th Street. Finding B11, that the proposal would or would not adversely affect the surrounding neighborhood with regard to traffic, neighborhood character, and/or existing land uses. As I mentioned earlier, the subject property is located near the southeast intersection of Best Avenue and 15th Street. The uses in the area include a convenience store, gas station, single-family, duplex homes, residential, sunset field, as well as vacant property. And I mentioned as far as traffic, the proposed annexation would not adversely affect the surrounding area with regard to traffic. 15th Street has the available capacity to accommodate additional traffic generated from that subject site. And this is a generalized existing land use map. This is the subject property. This is multifamily. This is a vacant parcel and commercial use here, the gas station. This is the existing county zoning outlined in the green. These properties are within Kootenai County and it's zoned agricultural suburban. And this is our city zoning map showing the subject property. This is the multifamily use that I mentioned, which is the R8 zone, R12, and this was zoned neighborhood commercial, but it is still currently vacant. The City Council must consider this request and make the appropriate findings to approve, deny, or deny without prejudice this evening. Any questions for me?
Questions for Tammy Woody?
I have one. Tammy, on the east side of that piece of property, isn't that a flood zone?
It is in a bit of that, yes.
So
So they'll have to address that at the time of development and work with our city engineer.
Okay, thanks.
Dan?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Tammy, were letters sent out?
Yes, we do our mailing within the 300-foot, or the mailing surrounding that property.
And
Don't believe we got anything back.
now, did we send a letter to School District 271?
We do. on a regular basis.
And did they send anything back?
We didn't receive anything.
I just want to let you know, I had a meeting about 2 weeks ago with Dr. Cook and former trustee Ann Seddon to discuss why they aren't sending or replying to our letters. So hopefully you'll hear something back in the future, because this is, if they build the units in there, and there's families, there's kids, they impact the schools.
Yeah, we'd love to hear from them.
Yeah.
Thank
Any
you.
other questions for Tammy? Thank you, appreciate that.
Thank you.
Now we have the applicant here, would have 10 minutes to give their proposal. Renata, would you like, Renata will need to swear you in, get your name and address, and Renata will swear you in.
Robert Tate, 1625 North 4th, Coeur d'Alene.
Thank you. Do you swear that the testimony you are about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes, I do.
Thank you.
We're here representing Aspen Homes and Development for proposed annexation and zoning to an R17. Tammy did such a good job explaining the proposed project. There's not much more that I can add, or maybe I can ask some questions. It is a 1.228 acre parcel. It's infill within the existing city, and we do recognize that there is a floodplain in this corner. We have that map, so we understand that. And I just want to bring forward the words that John Ingalls said during the Planning Commission. This is part of the Northeast Prairie zoning districts, and it's as he said, it's an eclectic mix of varying uses, and we are part of that. And so just, and that's what we're proposing. That we are surrounded by all different types of uses in that area, and we think we can be a good neighbor within that. All the utilities are adjacent in 15th Street. We did verify that with Mike Becker, even though the slide said Ramsey Road, but they are in there. There's water, sewer, the dry utilities, the transportation. One of the issues that come up is that this proposed approach, when we ever get there, is far enough away from Best Avenue. Typically, you'd like to be 125 feet, and I think we're like 300 and some. And it would pretty much lined up with the adjacent street across. So that's our proposal. I'm here to answer questions, and like I said, I would be brief because Tammy did such a good job for us.
Questions? Kiki?
I have been just looking at this map, and if I missed it, I apologize, but it looks like there's 3 other surrounding parcels that are still in the county that if this annexed in, how would they access to the dead end of 16th Street if?
There's a road right here. That's how they access, is through here.
So the
Private.
2 behind to the east of 16th Street is that all one parcel that could annex in as one parcel? It just looks like
These parcels could annex in. This road would have to be made public in order for them to annex in and have legal access. It's a private road at the current time.
Oh. So they're landlocked. Once this is annexed into the city, then that kind of county piece is backed up by the floodplain and in kind of a rectangle of just county property then?
Yes. I mean, they still have their legal access through the private road, but yeah, they are. They're getting more surrounded.
And there isn't any plan on your part to connect 16th Street through there?
No.
Yeah.
We can't because it's private. We can't
Right.
connect to it.
Any other questions? All right, thank you, appreciate that. I have the sign-up list here. I don't have anyone that wishes to give any testimony. Anyone wish to be added to this list? Okay, so then I will, so let's open the public testimony. There isn't any other public testimony to be given. And so I will, at this time, close the public testimony and look for council action.
Mr. Mayor, I would move to approve A118A, which is a proposed 1.22 acre annexation from agricultural suburban to R17 zoning district for the 2400 North Block of 15th Street, applicant Aspen Homes and Development LLC, and to direct staff to negotiate an annexation agreement and develop the necessary findings and order.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Roll call, please. Renata?
McEvers?
Yes.
Gookin?
Yeah.
English?
Yes.
Eddinger?
Yep.
Miller?
Yes.
Motion carried. We'll move on to our next hearing. This is a legislative hearing. This is V-18-05, vacation of a portion of the alley right-of-way adjoining the easterly boundary of Lot 1 and north half of Lot 2, Block A, Sanders addition to the city of Coeur d'Alene. Dennis Grant is here tonight.
Good evening, council and mayor. I'm going to remove this off there. All right. So, decision point tonight is, should the city vacate the portion of alley right-of-way that adjoins the easterly boundary of Joe and Lynn Moore's property? It's on 304 South 11th Street. There's a vicinity map there showing. It's in that red area located right there. It's on the southeast corner of 11th and Mullen, single-family home. And the requested right-of-way was originally dedicated to the city of Coeur d'Alene in the Sanders Addition plat back in 1890. Been a while. The Public Works Committee unanimously approved the action at its regular scheduled meeting on July 23rd and directed staff to proceed onward for council action. The vacation of the requested right-of-way would not have any negative financial impact on the city and would add approximately 486 square feet to the county tax roll. The purpose of this request is to vacate a 6-foot strip of land to accommodate a garage structure and setback for the property owner. This would leave 16.37 feet of right-of-way for the alley. The wastewater department was contacted regarding access to the sewer main in the alley and gave approval of the vacation. All utility easements will remain in place. Just a little background on this. All the alleys in this downtown area are typically between 12 and 15 feet wide. And in this case, due to the two adjacent subdivisions, one being the Sanders addition, and then on the other side of the alley, Lakeshore addition. There's 22.37 feet of alleyway. So in most cases, in the downtown area, corridor area, and Sanders Beach area, a lot of the garages are encroaching into our right-of-way. So there's really no way to solve any of that, but in this case, since we do have that additional right-of-way, we are able to accommodate this request. At one point, I was hoping to get the whole alleyway, but it was fairly complicated, so at this point, we're just doing the corner lot and asking for 6 feet. And if there's any other future vacations, I think that 6 feet will work on most of the homes, if there is additional vacations in that alleyway in the future. So the city council should approve. The recommendation is that the city council should approve the vacation action per Idaho Code Section 50-1306 and to vacate the property to the applicant Joe Morris and Lynn Morris.
Questions for Dennis? Woody?
Dennis, let me just clarify something. So the alley was 22 feet originally.
Yeah.
We're giving them 6 feet. We aren't losing the alley.
No.
We're just.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, good question. This is a unique vacation in the effect that usually in the past when we vacated an alley, we vacated the entire alley because there wasn't any use for it and there wasn't any utilities in there. And then per Idaho State Code, half goes to one property owner and the other half goes to the other side of the alley. In this case, the city owns the right-of-way, and they're requesting a portion of that, which will in effect, I believe they're going to either tear down the garage and build a new one or remodel the existing one. I'm not sure exactly what that is, but the 6 feet will help accommodate the setback, which is, I believe 3 feet is the current code for setback, and any redesign on the garage. And we could have went less, but I was trying to think ahead in the future for if there is any other ones. I don't want to be putting any jogs in the alleyway. And so I think 6 feet is a good round number to accommodate any future vacations along that alleyway, except for maybe 1 or 2 homes that we'll have to do something differently about. But that may never happen, so.
So what's the standard width of most of the alleys?
In that area, it's, they're either 12 or 15 feet. 15 feet's the standard in the Platts downtown.
Enough for a trash truck to get down, right?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, there's plenty of room. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, you bet.
Any other questions for Dennis? Kiki?
And so this leaves us plenty of width for the alley, but is there going to be an easement required onto their property based on where the sewer utilities are?
Great question. So I met with Mike Becker with the wastewater department, and in his opinion, it's a shallow sewer main in there. The requirement is 20 feet, typically on new subdivisions, new development, but a lot of the alleys are already 15 or less, 12 feet in some cases. And so he said in this unique circumstance, he has no problem with the existing, what's going to be remaining for the existing right-of-way as an easement.
Okay.
Any other questions for Dennis? All right, thank you.
Yep.
We will open the public testimony portion of this, and on this list of folks that would like to testify, I have Joe Morris. And Joe, we just need your name and address for the record, please.
Yes, Joe Morris, 304 South 11th Street, Coeur d'Alene, Idaho. I'm a little embarrassed to take up your time with this issue, but it was in pursuit of to build a garage, and I actually have a building permit to do so. And we're proceeding, then we became aware of some of unique circumstances along the alley between the Sanders Addition and the East Lakeshore Addition. And part of that unique conditions are that the Sanders Addition was platted in 1890, and so there was nothing behind it. Later, the East Lakeshore Addition was platted in 1907, and the city was granted a 10.8 foot alley easement. And different plats of the city show that the Sanders Addition goes up against that alley right-of-way. But a number of surveyors have found that there was this other piece of land between the East Lakeshore Alley and the Sanders Addition. In our case, it's about 11.5 feet. And so that land, we thought we could go a quiet title route to say that we've been using it, because what has occurred is the city sort of moved into the alley and occupied 15 feet, and we, the folks on the Sanders side, down the length of the Sanders Addition, are utilizing part of that space as well. And so we went to the city and tried to figure out a solution. Then we went to the county, and then we had a final meeting with the city, and the county surveyor, who has jurisdiction over all these things, said that really all along the city has, because Sanders people can own it, all along it has belonged to the city of Coeur d'Alene. And so there's this large section of easement now that the city of Coeur d'Alene has down Sanders. And if you look down Sanders, every lot down Sanders occupies some of that. And as a matter of fact, if you grant this easement, I think a total of 20 square feet will be added to what we are already occupying. Our original garage that we were trying to replace was moved down. It was a stable at Fort Sherman, and it was moved down and put in place, and it's 3 feet over our back property line as it is. And so we've been trying to fix this, and not just for us, but to try to set some, with the city, some solution for what can occur down the entire alleyway. And so we're the guinea pig of the Sanders addition. And so again, my key points would be to be brief, that it's, the city has 22 feet to work with. By our property, you'll have 16 usable feet of right-of-way. And all the alleys in our part of town, as Dennis has mentioned, are 15 feet. And our alley itself turns into 15 feet down on Mountain. We will be 9.8 feet from the sewer line if you approve this vacation. And the city sewer folks, when we met with them, had said we'd need at least 7.5 feet. The usable alley space will actually be improved, and the alley will feel bigger when you go down that alley, because instead of a 3-foot setback for where our garage is now from the property line, it needs to be 20 feet. And so it opens up that space where the alley empties onto the Centennial Trail and Mullen Avenue. Only 10 feet of the proposed alley will be in an expanded area. The rest tucks in behind a fence, an old fence that we'll tear down and actually widen the alley a little. And so it seems surprising to be able to vacate 6 feet and then go down the alley and feel that it's a bigger alley than you started with in the first place. But it has to do with sort of the vacation, has to do with how much land there was in that alley, and I think it had to do with the original surveys and not always being quite as accurate as they are today, and there being some extra land in there that ends up being part of the city's. And so that's sort of the simple thing we're trying to do. The city staff has been great, and sort of as has the folks in the county, in trying to steer us through this. And, you know, this threatened to be the most expensive garage never built, and it may still be, but we thought we deserved at least one last shot. And a lot of folks have just built in this area, and and we thought, well, we need to really figure this out and be honest about it, and tell the building department it's not quite as we depicted, and so it's been a lot more work than we anticipated. But I think it can be a model for the rest of the alley, which is a unique situation, I think, for the city of Coeur d'Alene.
Any questions for Joe? Dan?
Well, just a comment. I would just say that I am glad you came. It sounds like this is one of the rare opportunities we can make somebody happy and maybe not make anybody else unhappy. So I'm glad to have you.
Who knows? You know, nothing surprises me these days. But no, I think, you know, it will look like a bigger alley, a more open alley when all this is done, just because most of the vacation is on property that already is occupied by fences in our existing garage.
Any other questions for Joe? All right, thank you. I have one other person that's on this list. However, I'm thinking that maybe they won't intended to be on the other list, but is there Ian Smith, 616 East Indiana here? Ian, did you want to testify on this one, or did you want on the next one? Okay, I'll just transfer your name over to the next one. So, if there isn't anyone else wishing to testify here, I would close the public testimony portion and look for council action.
Well, Mr. Mayor, I would move, so this happens in 2 steps. So the first step is to dispense with the rule and read Council Bill 18-1020 once by title only.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion on this? Renata, if you could read the title, please.
Council Bill number 18-1020, an ordinance of the City of Coeur d'Alene vacating a portion of alley right-of-way recorded in Book J, page 43F, records of Kootenai County, Idaho, generally described as a 6-foot strip of adjoining the easterly boundary of Lot 1 and the north half of Lot 2, Block A, Sanders Addition, in the city of Coeur d'Alene, located in the northeast quarter of Section 24, Township 50 North, Range 4 West, Boise Meridian, City of Coeur d'Alene, Kootenai County, Idaho, repealing all ordinances and parts of ordinances in conflict herewith, providing a severability clause, and providing for the publication of a summary of this ordinance and effective date hereof.
Roll call, please.
Gookin?
Yes.
English?
Yes.
Eddinger?
Yep.
Miller?
Yes.
McEvers?
Yes.
Motion carried.
And Part 2, I move to adopt Council Bill 18-1020.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion on this?
I just would like to thank the Morrises. This was a lot of work, and to get through all of these details, and I appreciated hearing about it and getting this housekeeping and this piece cleaned up.
Now the pressure is going to be on to build the garage.
Darn.
We're going to be watching.
Yeah. Roll call, please, Renata.
Gookin?
Yes.
English?
Yes.
Eddinger?
Yep.
Miller?
Yes.
McEvers?
Yes.
Motion carried. Next, we'll have our final public hearing of the night, and this is a quasi-judicial hearing. It's appeal of the Planning Commission approval of SP-8-18, a special use permit for R34 density at 623 East Wallace. I want to just review the order of how this is going to proceed. We're going to have Sean Holm is going to give his report. Then the appellant will have an opportunity to come up and speak. We will then have a time for public testimony. That's the time everyone can come up and give their viewpoint on this. Then the applicant will follow that. And then at the very end, the appellant will have a wrap-up and a chance to address any issues that have been brought up during the process. So that's kind of how we're going to roll this out tonight. And Sean, take it away.
Okay. Thank you, Mayor, City Council. So tonight before you, you have a public hearing. This is an appeal for a special use permit, SP 818. This request is for an R34 special use permit in an R17 residential zoning district. The appellant is Kate Coleman Wood, MD. She lives on Wallace Avenue. The owner is Miller Stauffer Properties, and the applicant is Annalise Miller. So this hearing is on appeal made by letter, which was provided by Kate Coleman Wood, dated August 1st, 2018, of the Planning Commission decision, which was a 5-1 decision in favor of approval, which was made on July 10th of 2018. So as part of this hearing, at the end, City Council can make the following decisions for the appeal. They can affirm the decision that was made by Planning Commission. They can affirm with added conditions provided by council. They can reverse the decision or remand that this request go back to the Planning Commission. And these options will be reiterated at the end of my presentation. So this request is a hair over half an acre, 0.51. It's at the corner of East Wallace Avenue and North 7th Street. It's commonly known as 623 East Wallace. Also, as part of the R34, just so everyone is aware, and we brought this up last time, is that with approval of that, without any conditions, that the height would increase from 45 feet to 63 feet. At Planning Commission, planning staff made the recommendation to reduce that to what they would be allowed already in an R17 of a maximum of 45 feet. That was approved as part of that, as a condition.
Does that hold? So tonight, is that decision for the height, does that stay?
That is up to council. If you would like to change that, my understanding is that that you can.
Thanks.
Or add additional conditions, as was mentioned earlier. So here is a location map. This is on the corner of Wallace and 7th Street, as mentioned earlier. This is the subject property. Just to the north, and I'll point this out a little bit further along, is a existing parking lot that will serve the development that was approved in the 80s. This is a closer view of that subject property. And here is the site plan that was provided by the applicant. As mentioned, here is some parking that would support the use that is proposed. Back in 1986, it was a zone change request and also a special use permit request for commercial parking that would support the original building here, which was a GTE built in the 60s. All right, before we move on to the conditions, I'd like to provide a little more information on the existing what is already existing there. There's approximately 8,000 square feet. It's below grade as well as on the main floor, the first floor, ground level. As mentioned, it was built as a GTE building. Social Security offices were there until recently, so it was also used as a civic use. They are proposing a building that would be 30-foot tall, 2-story, with a basement, mixed-use facility that has apartments over the first floor. The ground floor would be a mix of residential use with walkout porches, so they would lose a portion of that, the grandfathered use that's already there as part of this request. My understanding is from the last hearing is that Frontier Communications maintains some pretty important utilities in the basement for the city of Coeur d'Alene. There's an agreement in place that it must remain there in perpetuity until it's replaced somewhere else in the community. So there is no changing that portion of the building. Alrighty. So there are 3 findings that need to be made for a special use permit. In this case, an appeal. I'll move through these 3, but there is also a portion with R34 where considerations need to be taken under consideration, and that will be towards the end of the PowerPoint. So the first finding is B8A, is that the proposal is or is not in conformance with the comprehensive plan. This portion, or this property, falls within the historical heart. It is within the stable established area. Tammy did read this into the record for the one previous. I can do the same. It's a stable established area where the character of the neighborhoods has largely been established and in general should be maintained. The street network, the number of building lots, and general land uses are not expected to change greatly within the planning period. This is the definition of historical heart today. You have to realize this was from 2007 and isn't exactly current. We are working on that, as mentioned earlier. So the historical heart of Coeur d'Alene contains a mix of uses, an array of historic, residential, commercial, recreational, and mixed uses. Widely governed by traditional zoning, there are pockets of infill overlay zones that allow development based on floor area ratio. This does not fall within those infill districts, although there are many other entities and ordinances that serve this area to ensure quality development for generations to come. Numerous residential homes in this area are vintage, and residents are very active in local policy making to ensure development is in scale with neighborhoods. You can see as the room is full of people tonight, that is indeed the case and still holds true 11 years later. So historical heart tomorrow. So this is what the comprehensive plan envisions this large area that was just shown up on that map will become over time. So increased property values near Lake Coeur d'Alene have intensified pressure for infill, redevelopment, and reuse in the areas surrounding the downtown core. Stakeholders must work together to find a balance between commercial, residential, and mixed-use development in the historic heart that allows for increased density and harmony with long-established neighborhoods and uses. I won't read about Sherman Avenue and Northwest Boulevard. We'll talk about that later. Neighborhoods in this area, Government Way, Foster's Garden, Sanders Beach, and others are encouraged to form localized groups designed to retain and increase the qualities that make this area distinct. And here are some characteristics that neighborhood, or that historical heart neighborhoods will be in the future. Infill does not apply in this case, but encourage growth that complements and strengthens existing neighborhoods, public open spaces, parks, and schools while providing pedestrian connectivity, increasing numbers of and retaining existing street trees, and that commercial building sizes will remain lower in scale than in the downtown core.
Excuse me a sec. Did you say that this area doesn't apply, it doesn't apply to infill?
Well, there are 3 distinct infill overlay districts. So there's the downtown east, the downtown north, and the midtown, and those are infill regulations that apply only to those 3 districts.
Okay.
So that changed development from meeting your setbacks and parking requirements to a floor area ratio multiplier. So it's a different way of looking at development.
Okay.
So that's what that is talking about. All right, so there are multiple comprehensive plan objectives that are provided in your staff report. I picked out the 3 that applied the most in this case rather than creating text that is so tiny nobody could read it. Objective 1.2 is community design. Objective 1.4 is efficiency of existing infrastructure. And objective 3.1 is managed growth. And there are the definitions right below that rather than reading them into the record. So finding B8B is that the design and planning of the site is or is not compatible with the location, setting, and existing uses on adjacent properties. So here is a generalized land use map, and this shows what the land uses are in the area. As mentioned at Planning Commission, this used to be a blue, it still had some red to it, but it was mostly the Social Security building, which is a civic use as defined by the color over here, blue. Since they have left, it has turned to red, which is a commercial use for Frontier, as well as what it was originally designed for, which was GTE. There is a yoga studio, which was an old school initially here on the corner. That is a commercial use right now, as well as the parking lot, which provides parking for this building that was approved by special use permit in '86. There are some other civic uses around the area, and then surrounding that, you can see in yellow is single-family dwellings, as well as the kind of lighter brown color, which are duplexes or higher density properties. So here are some pictures, site photos of the area. So this is looking from down Wallace, looking to the west, 7th Street running north-south here. This is the subject property, the Social Security building, and the existing church building that is across the street. A question came up at the last time is how tall this is. It's approximately 40 to 45 feet, depending on where that spire sits at its highest. I didn't get out there and measure it by hand. So the view of the existing structure and driveway from Wallace Street looking northeast towards 7th Street. This is the curb cut that accesses the existing parking lot here, and the building in question here, and then the alley runs right behind these cars shown here. All right, so this is the alleyway I was just talking about. This is looking west. The parking lot that exists right now is to the right on this photo, and then this is a picture of that parking lot from the alley looking north that was approved by special use permit in the '80s. Here are some prior special use permits that are from the area. You can see, and it's actually easier to read up there than it is on my screen here. But there are a number of different retail sales, and R34 over here, which was mentioned, ended up being the fire department administration building, so there was no residential units that were actually built on this, although R34 was approved. There was commercial film from '94, a long time ago, and then community education for school here. So the last finding that needs to be made is that the location, design, and size of the proposal are such that development will or will not be adequately served by existing streets, public facilities, and services. So this is where things differ a little bit from Planning Commission, because through the testimony at Planning Commission, some questions were raised. There was an addendum that was provided at the end of my staff report that had some additional language from engineering as well as wastewater to try and help define those questions or answer those questions that came up last time. As far as our city departments go, there was no objections were raised for this special use permit as it was proposed. All right, so here's notes from our planning department, is that it's currently an R17 zoning district, and it would allow 8.8 units by right up to 45 feet. The number of parking stalls is generated by the number of bedrooms that are provided per unit. We do round up at triplex and above, so at 8.8 we would round up to 9. With the approval, if it is decided that approval, it can be approved, R34 would allow 17.25. We round down because it didn't reach 0.5. So 17 total units with a height of 63 feet. As mentioned before, that was capped at 45, which is what is allowed by right in an R17. So building elevations, this was provided by the applicant. This is what they had envisioned for the property. 7th Street here. The existing church and the yoga studio, old school, is shown here. And then basically moving south to the intersection, Wallace here, 7th running north-south. This is what the front and side of the building would end up looking like.
Is that a fence?
This?
Yeah.
It is.
6 feet?
No, that's 4. Would be my best guess. You can ask the applicant, but a 6-foot fence would be taller than that.
I have a question in regards to, just on the worksheet here, it shows a prohibition of site access directly onto 7th. Is that set in stone, because it's showing access onto 7th here?
That is what they were, or what that talks about is access directly from 7th, creating a new curb cut. So the access right now is from the alley, which already exists.
Okay, so the alley stays open.
The alley does stay open,
Okay,
yes.
got
That
it.
is owned by the city.
And then there's one other thing here in the, I'm trying to understand this. It says the applicant's description of the surrounding structures, church and yoga studio, and is consistent with the historical heart guidance in the comprehensive plan that encourages new infill, but you're saying this is not considered infill. Is that, am I grasping that?
This could be considered infill, but it doesn't fall within the infill overlay districts. So those are two separate issues. So any project where you're taking a lot that exists, you know, in close proximity to downtown and you're repurposing that or adding to it and densifying that, that is considered infill. So that can be
that's what this-
citywide.
okay.
But the infill regulations only apply to 3 different areas in the city of Coeur d'Alene.
Gotcha. Sorry, I keep bringing that up. I
No,
need
that's
that
okay. It is
clarified.
confusing.
So the special use permit on the old school, when was that? Seems like I remember something like that. We can't quite see it from,
Community education, SP 1384.
2013.
So a lot of the times, the older schools never did comply. They never did get a special use permit. So over the years, if they were to add on or to do something that would generate the opportunity for the city to bring them into compliance, that's when we requested that they pulled a special use permit at that time. So the school's much older than the 80s, but it took until the 80s for us to get compliance.
so the compliance there is that they put wheelchair ramps in and got, so they could use it. It sat empty for a long time, didn't it?
It did, and what you're talking about is more required by a building permit. So when a permit comes forward to move walls or build, put in bathrooms or something of that nature, that's when we get ADA access and grab bars for the bathrooms and those sorts of things.
Okay, thanks. Sorry, I was getting off track there.
No, that's okay. All right, so I was.
Ron?
Yeah, isn't this kind of a older historical area?
Certainly, yes, it's a.
And the picture you showed there with the building that's going to be there, isn't that kind of out of place? I mean, you've got the church across the street, but otherwise, isn't it out of place?
That's an opinion question, I would say. Everybody has a different opinion of what looks good and what doesn't look good. That's more of a question left up to council to decide. There is the opportunity to put a condition on this request to have them go through design review or something of that nature, which could help define the look of the building that ends up being built there. But largely staff has some elements that we need to see, but determining what the colors are and the bump outs and things of that nature are usually left up to private development.
When I mentioned that about the height of the building out of place, the lady that spoke right at the first of the meeting, she said that cities should look at the codes about building heights and stuff like this. Don't you think we should maybe?
Oh, absolutely. If that's what the public wants to see and it's backed by council, we can absolutely go there. In 2005, in 6, that's when we did it last time. I was here for that. I was pretty green at that point. I was new to the staff. It's a long process. It takes some time. The comprehensive plan currently is geared towards higher heights in our downtown core. That's what it talks about, is keeping the height in that core, and the surrounding areas wouldn't have the intensity that you would see, 220-foot tall buildings that are in our downtown core proper. Is that end of questioning? All right, so when I was talking about the 3 conditions or the 3 findings that needed to be made, I said plus some additional stuff. So the R34 portion of our code does speak to what needs to be found or where it's allowed. So I'll read this into the record. The R34 district is intended as a high-density residential district permitting 34 units per gross acre that the city has the option of granting through the special use permit procedure to any property zoned R17, C17, C17L, or light manufacturing. To warrant consideration of the property must, in addition to having that zoning requirement, meet the following. So it needs to be in close proximity to an arterial, as defined by the Coeur d'Alene Transportation Plan, sufficient to handle the amount of traffic generated by the request in addition to that surrounding the neighborhood. So in this case, our code is fairly old, and so what we look to is KMPO, which is Kootenai Metropolitan Planning Organization, and they define what is considered a major collector, a minor arterial, a major arterial, and those sorts of things. So there isn't anything that's defined directly as just an arterial. And this map on the next slide will show you that. This information here was provided by the city engineer. He is on vacation right now and was unable to attend tonight. But he said the nearest arterial is Lakeside Avenue, which is approximately 900 feet to the south. Northwest Boulevard, East Sherman, and 15th are also classified as arterials. So you can see there's a minor arterial and principal arterials. This is the map, and it's zoomed way in because it actually shows the whole county. So I zoomed in. This is the subject property right here on the corner, and you can see that the minor arterials are in green, which is here, and 15th as well as Government Way, and major or principal arterials are like 95
Sean,
connection to.
I know he's on vacation. I hope he's having fun, but somehow looking at 3rd and 4th Street in purple, the volume and the size, and then making 7th Street look like that just doesn't work in my brain. Now, I know KMPO does this, but that doesn't make any sense. Am I missing something? Did they miscolor it? How would you compare 3rd and 4th Street to 7th Street? That's my logic.
Well, what's your concern?
Well, they're saying it's a lot more traffic goes on 3rd and 4th than 7th ever would have. Right? I see trucks on 3rd and 4th. I don't think I've ever seen big trucks on 7th. So they're saying it's a major collector.
Correct.
If 3rd and 4th are major collectors, how can 7th be a major collector?
It's probably that way because there's just not a stop sign in there.
Well, it doesn't go anywhere. It goes to Harrison, right?
Yeah.
Correct. Harrison,
But it is
Harrison
considered-
7th does jog a bit. And
It's where the
that's-
traffic goes. If you're trying to get north, you're gonna take that in that one area. That's where you're gonna go. You're gonna go on 7th.
Huh. I must drive the wrong streets or something, you know.
Right.
I'm gonna start driving 7th more now to get a feel for this.
Just make sure you stay at 25.
25, right, I know that one.
Another north-south that isn't designated by KMPO that works somewhat similarly is 11th Street. 11th Street does similar things.
Okay.
So that is the map that is provided by KMPO. In addition to that, it has to be in close proximity to shopping, schools, and park areas. And then if it's adult only, which doesn't apply in this case, it sounds like it would be, there'll be rented units, higher-end rented units. So this is a map showing the subject property in proximity to downtown and shopping there, and midtown shopping here, as well as schools and various parks that are in the area.
Could you define what is close proximity?
I knew that was going to come up. Proximity is not defined in our code, and it depends on the context in which it's played out. And so in this close proximity to shopping, schools, and parking areas, you can see here where those are at, but is that close proximity? That is up to council to weigh in on and decide. You know, we're in close proximity as the Earth is to the moon because the moon travels around us, but the moon is really far away. So you have to look at the context in which it's provided. All right, so there is an additional recommended condition. This is based on 1, and that's why it starts at 7 instead, because I put it first instead of last because it's the new one. There were some questions on wastewater. So at the last hearing, there was some comments that people were having problems with wastewater, and they thought that the wastewater line that the city owns may be failing or not able to handle additional capacity. Our wastewater department said that they had recently reconditioned that in 2016 through the alley, and that it definitely can handle the proposed capacity for these units. As part of that, and this is normally provided or looked at the time of building permit, but they thought since the opportunity is here, we'd put a condition now, is that, and I'll just read it, the wastewater utility requests as a condition of the special use permit proposed increased densities is that the developer bring the subject's property sewer lateral connection into compliance during development of the subject property. So as I understand it, that basement level where Frontier stuff is actually ends up not going directly out to that wastewater line and travels farther down and before it connects so that it can gravity flow. And so what the request is since they are asking for additional density and they're going to be redoing that structure if approved, is that they connect as required by code. So they would end up having to put in some sort of pump to get that lower level wastewater to that line in the alley. The other ones are exactly the same as they were in Planning Commission. Additional water main extensions will be provided at the developer's expense. Let's see, additional water service will have cap fees due, time of building permit, and then planning put in here, reiterated the conditions from the special use permit in 86. They're keeping the landscaping and making sure that there's not an additional access directly off of 7th Street. And the fence be maintained. This is the one that I had talked about earlier, is capping the maximum height at 45 feet, which is what is allowed by right now in an R17 district. The existing floor area dedicated to commercial office space may not increase. In this case, it is decreasing, so we wanted to make sure that we're capping that grandfathered use. Existing street trees must remain, and they can be pruned to urban forestry standards at the developer's expense. All right, so this is your action alternatives. The City Council must consider this request and make appropriate findings to A, affirm the decision made by Planning Commission, B, affirm with added conditions from Council, C, reverse the decision entirely, or D, remand this request back to Planning Commission. That concludes my staff report. I'll stand for questions.
Questions for Sean? Dan?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Sean?
Yes.
If we reverse the decision, what is the current status of the property?
It is zoned R17.
But it's non-conforming use now?
It is a non-conforming, legal non-conforming use.
Okay.
So they could maintain their existing use on if they want to. Nothing would affect that.
Sorry, that was kind of my question as well. So the height that it is right now at an R17 and the basement, we understand, is frontiers, so nothing would be changed there, but the main floor could technically be broken up to any sort of commercial use?
No, that's not correct. Because it is zoned R17 and it's a grandfathered use, the uses that have been approved in the past could continue, but, and I have this actually prepped. So staff did take a look at the different uses that are allowed. And there's two different types of quote-unquote commercial uses to the layman. That's broken into service activities and commercial activities. And so service activities are professional and administrative offices, and that's what has been there in the past. So that could continue in some form as that. But we wouldn't allow like a vet to go in, or a hotel motel, or
So
some of these
lawyers,
other commercial uses.
Dentists, lawyers, who would decide what could go in there? I guess I'm trying to compare what this box could look like if nothing was allowed to move forward, and how would that work? Because it looks like, and I'm visualizing it as a box right now, because this isn't the design review commission, so the design is whatever they've given us as sort of a speculative idea. So I'm trying to make sure that I'm viewing the uses that could occur there if the change in the density was not allowed. What would the neighborhood impact be? Who would decide what would happen commercially on that first floor?
That would be decided amongst our planning director and our legal staff to determine what uses have been allowed in the past and what are grandfathered and could go forward. So we have identified the ones that we are aware of. Once in a while, we can look up old data from like an old sign permit, and that will let us know if there was an additional use in the past based on that sign permit. But that is only within, like, we look back only between 10 and 15 years. We don't go back to like the 60s and say, oh, someone pulled a permit for a car lot, so we're not going to allow a car lot to be there. So the professional and administrative offices could continue. That includes insurance and real estate offices, architects, engineers, lawyers, and accounting offices, planning and educational research services, doctors, dentists, and other healthcare practitioners, medical testing and analysis services, corporate headquarters, branch offices, and data storage centers is included in that. And that's under a service activity, as well as communication services, which are activities that include the provision of broadcasting and other information relay services accomplished primarily through the use of electronic phone mechanisms. Such activities are typical of television and radio studios and telegraph offices. Obviously, I tell this was written in the 80s.
So they could put a
but
cell
that's
phone
Frontier.
store there? They could put a cell phone store on the corner, like a Verizon store?
No, Verizon is a retail store. This is,
So this is-
communication
okay,
services.
services.
So it's a service that's provided to the people of Coeur d'Alene through that mechanical equipment that exists in the basement. That's what that is. All right, so next is the civic uses, which was the Social Security, which is administrative offices under a civic activity, which are activities that are typically performed by public, quasi-public, and public utility administrative offices such as city, county, state, or similar offices. And finally, essential services, which is kind of splitting hairs here between the service and the commercial use, but essential services below grade are activities that include the maintenance and operation of public utilities, typical of gas, electric, telephone, sewer lines, water lines. The following activities and facilities are also included in this group. However, these wouldn't apply. It just says that as part of an essential service, you could have cemetery support services or wireless communication facilities, like a cell phone tower.
So are there any restrictions according to the zoning for the pre-existing, what used to be there, on the hours that any of these tenants that are on already by right would allowed to be leased in there could operate?
There is no zoning that I'm aware of except for neighborhood commercial and community commercial that control hours of operation.
So there could be a 24-hour business leasing there?
There could be.
Okay. Okay, and then the 9 additional that they are right now in R17 would be the second floor, which is already capped at 45 feet. And that's what the new density required, but that would be 9 additional living units is all that would fit on a second floor. Is that?
They could, well, they can do anything by right in an R17 that R17 allows. So if they wanted to raise the building and keep the Frontier stuff in the basement and just build residential, they could build those 9 units at a maximum of 45 feet tall. They could do that. So they're allowed to do anything that's allowed in an R17, because that's the current zoning, and then the grandfathered items that I just read into the record.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Dan?
I know in the past, because actually I taught there part-time for Lewis and Clark College, so that was, and they had classrooms. We had, you know, there was quite a bit of activity in night classes, so is that something that it could go back to a, you know, kind of a satellite college campus?
Yeah, if it is somewhat recent past, then yes, we would honor that as a continued use. Yes, it would be grandfathered.
Any other questions for Sean? Thank you, Sean. Appreciate that. Now is the appellant's opportunity to give testimony. I have the appellant as Kate Coleman Wood. Come on up and give your presentation, please.
Who's going to help you? Do you? Okay.
So just state your name and address, and then she'll swear you in.
Dr. Kate Coleman Wood, 524 East Wallace.
Okay. Do you swear that the testimony you are about to give is the whole truth and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Thank you.
All right. I'd like to thank the council for the opportunity to bring our appeal to you. We are hoping tonight for a full reversal of the Planning Commission. We'd like to start our presentation with an overview. I'd like you to focus on 3 main headings that we're going to support throughout our presentation. The 3 main headings is that this proposal does not meet city code, that it is not in compliance with the city's 2007 to 2027 comprehensive plan, that the findings of the Planning Commission are incompatible with the community goals, which will be represented by several objective findings and a sizable petition. First up is the city code. So this application fails to meet the city code's requirements to rezone the property to R34 because it does not transition to a commercial or an industrial zone. It is not close to shopping, and we will define what shopping is as set forth by previous precedent in the last several years. And it is not served by an arterial as defined by what an arterial is by city dictum. The City of Coeur d'Alene City Code 17.05330B provides that this R34 district is appropriate as a transition between R17 and industrial/commercial. The purpose of this high-density zone is to increase the R17 to R34 to transition to the more intense use that is found in these commercial or industrial zones. It does not make a smooth transition to increase from an R17 up to an R34 and back down to the C of R8 that you will see in our graphics that actually surrounds this property. The previous graphics that you have been shown are visualized from the proposed property looking, or from the neighborhood looking into the property. What you have not been shown is what it looks like from the property out. And what we will demonstrate later that you will see this is a C of R8. As we know, an R8 limits 8 units per acre, opposed to the R34, which is our 34 units per acre. Current zoning has increased the restrictions of the private property person to only allow 2 structures in our lots, not going up to this high increase in intensity. Throughout the presentation, we will also discuss the difference between density, intensity, and then scale, which are words that are actually quite important to this presentation. This graphic shows the location of all 34 special use permits that have been granted since 2007 comprehensive plan was adopted. We'll examine these starting from the top. Our property is down here. The first one, which is up here. This shows the appropriate transition from an R17 to an R34 commercial zoning as required by code. As you can see, it is serviced by an arterial, and which is Government Way, and then a major arterial, which is Highway 95. The second property, also quite north. As you can see, Government Way, R34, surrounded by commercial, R17. Since 2007, the comprehensive plan went into effect. All of the approved special use permits for R34 zone have transitioned to commercial or industrial zones, as the code requires. No permit has been approved allowing an application to use the R34 to transition to a low-density R8. Our third property, over in this area. Again, you can see on this map how the R17 is surrounded by commercial 17, another commercial 17, and a major arterial. As you look at our project, the project transitions to R8 on two sides. I would also like to highlight that the stated commercial site of the old school district is not straight commercial. To be truly fair, it's neighborhood commercial. And if you look at the definition of what neighborhood commercial is it's a special designation, where in a neighborhood commercial setting, the persons that are going to participate in that building are expected to come either on foot or on bike. And that was granted, if I believe, in 2014, which answers your earlier question. These are some photos that we have obtained that show what it looks like looking out from the new proposed R34 site. As you can see, these are our homes. These are incredibly low density. These are R8. This is 7th Street. 7th Street where we cross to get to Bryant and Sorensen. Because the special use permit does not meet the city section of 17.05 330B requirements to transition to commercial or industrial zones. On these grounds alone, I believe that this should be denied and that the Planning Commission's decision should be reversed. However, we have further data that we'd like to present to you tonight. The code also requires that the R34 zone be in close proximity to shopping. The code envisions that R34 be used near these commercial zones and not near a low-density residential neighborhood. If you look at the previous properties that we have cited on our previous map, the three most recent R34 approved zones, the first one, in addition to being close to an arterial, is close to a Walgreens, a FedEx, and Costco. The second one is close to Albertsons and Shopko, and again, is against an arterial. The project does also not meet the city codes for transportation. City Code 1705-330A requires that the property be in close proximity to an arterial. Because to be in close proximity to an arterial, as defined by Coeur d'Alene Transportation Plan, it needs to be sufficient to handle the amount of traffic generated by the request in addition to that of the surrounding neighborhood. And the project and accessing streets must be designed in such a way as to minimize the vehicular traffic through adjacent residential neighborhoods. The comprehensive plan clearly states via the Kootenai Metropolitan Plan Organization that we have interstates, we have principal arterials, we have minor arterials, and we have urban collectors. This map shows you the interstates in blue, the minor arterials, and the urban collectors. As stated earlier, 7th is designated an urban collector, the same as 3rd and 4th. However, a major difference between 3rd and 4th and 7th is The district is not crossing 3rd and 4th in order to walk to school to Sorensen and Bryant. As stated by our projects earlier, Project 1 up by Costco, the arterial is quite close. Project 2, the arterial is 100 feet from the project is 100 feet from Government Way. Project 3, the Lakeside Apartments, is served by East Coeur d'Alene Lake Drive directly. Our project, no arterial is near. It is only an urban connector. Now, what is near? What is close? 5 city blocks, you have to go through an R8 and an R12 neighborhoods to get to Sherman. 6 city blocks, you have to go through an R8, an R17, and a DC to get to Government Way. 9 city blocks, it takes you to get to Northwest Boulevard. And 8 city blocks, you have to go to get to 15th. Those are for pedestrians or walking, and a major thoroughfare for the core of our downtown. This clearly does not meet the criteria of minimizing vehicular traffic through adjacent residential neighborhoods. This slide clearly shows that this will increase the traffic to get to the arterial through adjacent city neighborhoods. It is also not in compliance with the 2007 to 2027 comprehensive plan. There are sections 1 through 4. Section 1 has to do with the natural environment. Section 2 has to do with economic environment. 3 is home environment, and 4 is the administrative environment. We have selected some key points that we feel illustrate how it does not comply. Objective 1.1, community design employ current design standards for development that pay close attention to the context, sustainability, urban design, pedestrian access, and usability throughout the city.
You can take as long as you need.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Appreciate that. The land use intensity of R34 special permit does not support this context. R8 and R34 are intended for distinctly different intensities of land use. I'd like to talk a little bit about intensity. So the site intensity shows the intended gradient of land use and intensity. The project, although physically proposed at an appropriate scale, ignores the resulting intensity that will be focused on the corner of 7th and Walnut. It does not matter if you're 30 feet tall, 45 feet tall. What will happen is they're proposing 17 living units, 17 families that are going to be occupying 2 residential lots. So as we look at our bar chart here, this is what is intended for my neighborhood. This is what will happen to my neighborhood related to intensity, even though the scale is appropriate for the code.
To you, back to that slide, please.
Yes.
What are we looking at?
You are looking at...
Because I can't read those things below the red bars.
Sure. So what this is, so this has downtown, so this is the, so your vertical axis would be the intensity, the volume, and then your horizontal axis is labeled as downtown core, R34, R17 multifamily, R17 single family, and R8.
Okay, thank you.
Goal 3, home environment. There's 4 points here that we feel that this application directly violates. We'll go through them one by one. So objective 3.01, manage growth. This was to provide for the diversity of stable housing, or of suitable housing, within existing neighborhoods to match the needs of a changing population. The neighborhood is changing to accommodate young families and professionals, evidenced by tech, healthcare, and associated professional service booms. The need is for higher quality, large transitional housing, not small efficiency apartments. There is a paucity of 2 to 3 bedroom upscales, but not extravagant, living that would meet the needs and desires of someone moving from a major metropolitan area. This is just a suggested alternative to the current density that has been proposed that could be done with the current R17 zoning that they have. Objective 3.05, neighborhoods. You want to protect and preserve the existing neighborhood from incompatible land uses and development. As stated earlier, this area of town is not an infill zone. The land use intensity of R34 is incompatible as a buffer between the R8, 8 units per acre, and the R17, as defined as 17 units per acre. And this is why we place the photos looking out from the project to the neighborhood of surrounding R8. Objective 3.16, capital improvements. To ensure infrastructure and essential services are available for properties in development. The residents of the Garden District in close proximity to the project are skeptical of the documented opinions of Chris Bosley, the city engineer, Kyle Marine, and Mike Becker regarding stormwater, streets, and wastewater. With regarding the stormwater, as there is a lake that forms every heavy rain in front of 524 East Wallace, despite the very best attempt of the city crews to remedy the problem. This standing water attracts and grows insects in the summer and spring and forms icy, unsafe conditions in the winter. The streets, although technically wide enough, as stated by the employees of the city, they lack a yield stop convention, i.e. some traffic modulation, with current traffic saturations has led to several accidents, clearly documented by the police department, only to be worsened by the increased volume. We do not see any issue with general water. However, wastewater, as the pipes to the city are infiltrated with tree roots and debris, it is difficult to not question how loading the pipes with R34 level of density would not affect the existing aging infrastructure negatively. 3.18, transportation. Providing accessible, safe, and efficient traffic circulation for motorized, bicycle, and pedestrian modes of transportation. Requesting input from authoritative districts and neighbor communities when applicable. The increased density will increase congestion in an already congested area, as evidenced by the chaos that ensues on the special events and festivals that we all love and would like to see more of. Pedestrian traffic and bicycle transportation is a key part of the Garden District, and the increase to R34 would further endanger the plausibility of pedestrian and bicycle transit. The historical heart. As stated earlier by Sean, he talked about stable, established neighborhoods where the land use is not expected to change. Infill will reflect the scale of the existing neighborhood, and we will encourage the growth that complements and strengthens the neighborhood. With regards to infill reflecting the scale of the existing neighborhood, it is true that scale is defined as the ratio of the size of a given object compared to similar objects in close proximity. The objects that have been selected are the wedding chapel and the schoolhouse. However, the scale is not reflected of the land use intensity, which is defined as the measurement of all use in a defined area. Intensity has been conveniently not addressed in prior proposal when R34 rezoning was approved by the Planning Commission. As stated before, the schoolhouse is a neighborhood commercial designation designed for the majority of persons using that space would be arriving by walking or bicycle. And the 45-foot height associated with the church, which is a wedding chapel, has to do with the spire of the church, which I find is a slightly misleading since the structure itself is much smaller than that. Encourage growth that complements and strengthens existing neighborhoods. An increase in land use density at the corner of 7th and Wallace to the R34 is detrimental to the growth and weakens the existing neighborhood. It does this by increasing vehicular traffic, increasing transient living, and degrading the sense of ownership, which is the cloth of our neighborhood quilt. People in this neighborhood maintain the sidewalks, personally fund arborists to maintain the city trees, stop our sprinklers on events so that people parking don't get wet. We are the ones that open our backyards and barbecues to VBRO guests, the bed and breakfast attendees, and more than any other of the historical heart neighborhoods, the Garden District residents are truly the ambassadors of Coeur d'Alene. Currently, we have we enjoy this role, and changing to this R34 will degrade that role. Goal number 4, objectives that we take special address of are making decisions based on the needs and desires of the citizens. And object 4.06, strive for community involvement that is broad-based and inclusive, encouraging public participation in the decision-making process. At this point, I would like to present the council with 155 signatures of the Garden District that would like to not see this project go through. But the most impressive part about this is that these signatures were collected in evening hours over a period of about 5 days. 155 signatures. And I think that's notable. And I'll be passing those over at the end of the presentation. Findings to approve the Planning Commission staff should not be accepted. Sean highlighted B8A, B, and C, and coming to a close, we'd like to go through those. So B8A, the proposal is not in conformance with the comprehensive plan. I believe that through the beginning of the presentation, I have highlighted how this is not in compliance with the 2007 to 2027 comprehensive plan on several points. With regards to the design and planning of the site is not compatible with location, setting, and existing use of adjacent properties. Although the massing and physical scale of the building would be the same as if it were developed under R17, the intensity of the land use is far different. And therefore, we believe that this condition is not met. Again, stated the main graphic, with the yellow showing the intensity of the R34 drastically different than the R8 or R17. For B8C, will not be adequately served by existing streets, public facilities, and services. As stated previously, the residents who occupy the streets of the Garden District are skeptical that it has been clearly defined by the City of Coeur d'Alene that 7th is an urban collector. It is not an arterial. And I feel that we have several slides taken from the city that support that. There's 2 points here that have not been addressed previously. And one is the possibility of the sale of this property. The applicant requested an R34 density because the investment required to repurpose the structure requires a unit count in excess of the currently allowed R13 within the R17. Now, an excerpt from the applicant's narrative in the agenda packet dated July 10th, 2018 simply states, a private party is asking the City of Coeur d'Alene to make the numbers work. To do this, however, the City of Coeur d'Alene would circumvent the directives of 2007-2027 Comprehensive Plan and the City Code, as well as the promise that the city has made to its citizens, as represented by the Historical Heart. The next portion that I feel was incorrectly cited several times is the personal attributes of the developer. The planning commissioners inappropriately considered the personal attributes of the architect for the applicant in rendering their decision and stated that they considered such on the record. The applicant's architect is not relevant. The subject property may be sold after the application is approved. A less reputable developer could develop the property granted R34 special use, permitting used by other professionals. The commissioners should not have based a decision to increase density on the personal attributes, but rather the comprehensive plan and the city code. Thank you so much for the time to address the council.
Any questions? Time? Woody?
Just a couple. When you said that you didn't trust the opinion of the streets, water, sewer, where does that come from?
So what we're talking about is that unfortunately, there hasn't been a new traffic study. They had some software analysis of the current traffic, but they didn't have any dates of when that last software analysis was done and where the data came from to do that. The other issue is with the water runoff. Unfortunately, we were told at the meeting that the water runoff is not a problem, but all you have to be is present during a heavy rain you can tell that water runoff is a problem as you're standing in 6 inches of water in the middle of the street.
So no stormwater draining.
It's quite a problem.
But the data, what is the data about? You want
Oh.
a traffic study?
In the Planning Commission, when we had the original Planning Commission hearing, they had stated that there was software analysis that stated that it would be fine to use, to have the increase to R34. But that's all they told us. They didn't tell us when the last time the analysis was done, no real data about that. They just said it would be fine. And so we're skeptical because we haven't seen any real analysis. And there hasn't been a physical traffic study done where the employees of the city have actually come out and looked at it.
And then
And
the
they
sewer.
also haven't looked at the accident reports.
And then the sewer.
The sewer, that's anecdotal. So with the sewers in that area, it's just a constant problem with all the old pipes of the trees infiltrating. And so what we're concerned about is that the increased intensity of the property will further overwhelm the aging sewer lines that are existing under our streets.
Okay, you know that for a fact that
No,
those.
we're concerned. I know that it's infiltrated by tree roots. I know that for a fact, as I have to scope my toilets every 6 months to prevent backflow, and the problem is lying in the city lines.
The city lines.
Correct, sir.
Okay. Thank you.
So my one question on, just curious, how, in your opinion, does the intensity affect the water runoff issue? If the box is the same size and the requirements for swells and drainage are the same, how does the intensity issue, which that seems what this is about, is the number of people?
I think I think that the intensity issue, you have probably, well, it depends on how many bathrooms they want to put in there. But I think that spot, which was section, I believe that was in section 4. I believe that's in section 4. I think that is just one of the supporting concerns of the neighbors. Certainly a minor concern. Certainly the more major concerns are the traffic. Certainly the more, and not, what I mean by traffic is I mean the use of an arterial versus a collector road. I think that speaking to the anecdotal concerns of water runoff, of the sewer system, I think we can get lost in the forest, we can get lost in the trees. It's certainly not the main, I would hate to be that would be your main takeaway from the presentation. I would feel like I failed if that was the main takeaway.
No, it wasn't. I just thought of it when Woody asked that, so.
I guess the question, did you live there when the Social Security office was there?
Yes, I did.
How much traffic did that provide, the Social Security?
Almost none.
There was no traffic?
It
at the
was
Social Security
very
office?
minimal. It was very minimal.
Yeah.
We were all younger then.
Ha! Well, there's been 10,000 new Medicare enrollees every day for the last
Yeah.
7 years, so.
Don't go to the Social Security office now, I'll tell you, it's a different world.
Well, in terms of, it sounds like part of what your theme and point is that it isn't compatible with some of the neighborhood and the uses and things. And actually, I'm very familiar. We had a home at 6th and Foster and 9th and Garden, and I'm born and raised here. So, in my mind, as I'm picturing that, about a block and a half away, there is a, 2-story apartment building. Just picturing it in my mind, it's probably somewhat like the church steeple size, and I don't know how many apartments are in there, but that's definitely old-time Coeur d'Alene, heart of that district, and, the architecture obviously would be different, but it seems to me like this is a very similar to that. Are you aware of the building I'm talking about?
Yes, you're talking about an 8-plex across from the St. John's Episcopal Church. Yeah. It's a building that has 8 units. It is in line with the R17 zoning, which would allow 13 units. It has been the collective, and I feel that I can speak for many of my neighbors, it has been the collective opinion that a 9 to 13 unit building would be absolutely acceptable, as it would fit the scale and some of those grandfathered intensities that you're speaking of, because as of right now, in the current code and zoning, that building could not be built with
Dan,
that area.
I'm wondering whether, if you're referring to one on Garden. Are you referring to?
Yeah.
You're in Fifth. Yeah, he was referring to the one at Fifth and Garden.
Fifth and Garden.
Yeah, there's an
Oh,
apartment, yeah.
that Fifth and Garden.
Oh,
Yeah, it's kind of a
It's kind of an
Tudor-looking
English
building.
architecture
Yeah,
and
but that's what you're referring to, right?
Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so your theory is the same for that one.
And I don't know how many that is, but it's,
I can't speak to that. I'm not
okay.
familiar.
Well, it's right down the street.
Any other questions at this time? Ron?
Yeah, I'd just like to say that you made a great presentation. I think you did a great job.
Thank you.
All right, thank you very much, appreciate that. Now, we'll move on to, this is the time where we're going to have the public testimony. I'm going to go down this list and go through the names. There are some folks that did not list whether they wish to testify or not. I'll go down through those and we'll review those again. But first on the list, I have Barb Crumpacker, who is in opposition and she wishes to testify. Barb here? Barb is not here. We'll move on. The next one is Robert. Robert lives at 910 East Garden. I can't quite make out the last name. He is in opposition, did not say whether he wished to testify or not.
I'll pass.
Okay. Then the next one is Lisa, and Lisa is in opposition, and Lisa wishes to testify. Is Lisa here? Lisa's here.
Looks good on you. Styling.
Do I need to do anything? No.
Yes, please state your name and address, and then I'll swear you in.
Lisa Benscheid, 823 East Pennsylvania Avenue.
Do you swear that the testimony you are about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you. I didn't know if we were going to be here this long. Hi, Kiki.
How are you?
I am currently on the Downtown Garden District Board of Directors. And so I am speaking. Oh, and I also have more petitions, so I should give them to you. I'd like to give you just a tad little bit of history of the Downtown Garden District. It was started in 2003, so it has been around for quite some time. At that time, with the boundaries, there were about 300 homes at that time with the boundaries that were set. And I think now, maybe it's going to be a little bit bigger. Some of the projects that we have gotten involved with the city, we spearheaded saving Sorensen Elementary School. It was going to be sold. There wasn't enough students, and now it is packed. It is one of the most amazing schools, and there is a waiting list of families that want their children to go there. We planted trees, over 100. We worked with the traffic department because we've got lots of kids running around, and we got some stop signs. And we also helped support the community garden and the shared harvest program. And we have these. If you don't have yours, come and see me. I've got a whole box of them.
Please address the microphone.
Yes, thank you. A quick review of the goals of why we started in 2003. To preserve and improve the quality of life of the Garden District neighborhood, monitoring zoning issues and promoting appropriate development projects that will have a positive effect on the neighborhood. To preserve the architectural character of our neighborhood, which the picture of the drawing did not look to me and many of us, harmonious with our neighborhood. The last one is to increase neighborhood safety and to be a voice and advocate for neighborhood concerns before you, the city government and council. So, in summary, we are against the planning and zoning change from R17 to R34.
Continue.
I'll talk real fast.
Yeah, as long as
And we are strongly urging you to change the zoning back to R17 and support our citizens of the community. Questions?
Thank you. Appreciate
Welcome.
that. Next on the list, I have Dick Stauffer. Dick, do you want you have the applicant's portion of it. Will you be doing the presentation for the applicant? Okay, all right. So we will move on then. The next one I have that I don't have whether they wish to testify or not, Daniel lives at 521 East Indiana. Daniel, do you wish to testify? Daniel apparently does not. Down to Tom Pelkey in opposition. Tom, are you here? Come on, do you wish to testify? Yeah. Come on up.
You can state your name and address for the record, that'd be great.
Tom Pelkey, 621 Coeur d'Alene Avenue.
Thank you. Now, do you swear that the testimony you are about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Thank you.
I just had a couple quick points. I'll be very brief. This was pointed out earlier, but the zoning change is for a property, not an applicant. And I know the city's very enamored with this particular applicant, but it really doesn't have anything to do with the equation, I don't believe. Another point that was alluded to is the applicant's financial situation should not be a consideration in this. And the last thing I wanted to point out is the mock-up of the building, I believe, is inaccurate to what would actually be built. This is simple math. Based on the footprint that is there, they would have to go 4 stories with a flat roof, capping off near 45 feet, and each unit would be approximately 1,000 square feet. That's it. Thank you.
I do have Adrian Wilhoit. They did not mark whether they wish to testify or not. Wish to testify? Come on up. State your name and address, and she'll swear you in.
Adrian Weholt, 711 East Indiana Avenue.
Thank you. Do you swear that the testimony you are about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Thank you.
I don't think I could say anything nearly as well as Dr. Wood did, but I did have a couple points that I wanted to bring up. I believe in the last meeting, the applicant admitted that the property could be profitable without a zoning change. So I think in this case, really what they're doing is they're devaluing our properties and upsetting our neighborhood strictly for more profit. I don't think that's right. I've been living in the Garden District for 10 years, and my wife and I now have a daughter who's almost school age. And, you know, we're really hoping she can go to Sorensen. And I think if we bring in 17 more families into the neighborhood, you know, the odds of her getting in, it's even tougher. I think that's also something that's not right, you know, considering, and we live 1 block from Sorensen, as well as 1 block from this project. We're kind of dead center. I think as it stands now with the commercial building, if they had that downstairs and then the apartments upstairs, as far as traffic goes, that would split it pretty evenly. People are coming to work as the residents are leaving for work. I think if you bring in twice as many residents, you're gonna have everybody leaving at once, everybody coming in at once. I worry about 7th Street, like I think everybody does. That's a street with 75 or a 25 mile per hour limit. It's 2 lanes. It's, you know, it's not 2 lanes each direction like they're in 4th Street. my daughter rides her bike on that street all the time, you know, on the sidewalks, and I really worry what that increase of traffic would cause. I think everything else that I was going to say has already been mentioned, so I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you. Next on the list, I have Shalene Weholt in opposition, but did not mark whether she wanted to testify or not. Okay, so okay. Ian Smith, this is your chance. Well, you signed this one too. You're not last either. We got a few more to go.
All right. Yeah, well, it's hard to, so I'm in opposition to this.
So name and address for the record, please, and she'll swear you in.
Ian Smith, 616 East Indiana. I do not object to the variance on the alley. So
Ian, I'm sorry, I need to swear you in really quick. Sorry. Do you swear that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? Thank you.
I do. Okay, so I have one question, and I've got two issues. You know, I went through the video, listened to the whole thing of the Planning Commission, and the 45-foot limit seemed to be a suggestion. And I wanted to understand whether or not there were any circumstances under which that could be 63 feet or higher than 45. So I don't know, Sean or somebody.
Sean, I get, so just to, if you could nod your head, it is a requirement in that approval of the Planning Commission that it can't exceed 45, is that correct? Correct. Yes, so cannot exceed 45.
Okay, so if they were to, if Miller Stauffer were to sell the property to somebody else, whoever bought it would be bound by the same conditions?
Correct.
Got it, okay, super. So my two issues are the rental density, everyone's talked about it. So my wife and I live down on Indiana, so we're a little over a block away. And Coeur d'Alene, 4th of July, you know, Wednesday with the market, every weekend, it's now getting to the point where we can't park in front of our own house. And you got to be so careful pulling out into the, from the alley into the streets. And a lot of streets don't have stop signs, and they don't have yield signs. And what you're proposing, and one of the things that a lot of us are baffled by, is that we don't see any benefit to the residents, but we hear about the benefit to the developer that they've got to make their numbers. And I moved here, I retired from Chicago and moved here 2 years ago. And I didn't rip down the house. We invested in redoing an old century home. And you're going to erode the fabric of our neighborhood if you allow these density exceptions to happen. And if you've got a bunch of people renting in an apartment and they are going to afford the rent, frequently people will bring in additional roommates. And we've already heard people talk in the Planning Commission about, well, there's a rental next door and there's 5 cars. And I don't think that's being considered by the developer, and it will be a problem. So that's my concern there. And then the last is the precedent that we're setting. It's like, you know, we're going to have an erosion of what attracts people to the Garden District. And this fellow, Commissioner Rumpler, I think I might have mispronounced it, he said he has an obligation to help developers maximize the return on their investments. Are you kidding me? Based on that logic, I'm worried about every empty lot in the Garden District. Or if somebody's going to knock a house down and go and get rezoning. And we expect the people on the commissions to abide by the regulations and not by favoritism of the architects. Anyway, that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Next person that I have on the list wishing to testify is Walter Burns. Walter is in opposition.
Hi, I'm Walter Burns at 906 East Foster.
And she'll swear you in, please.
Do you swear that the testimony you are about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Thank you.
You know, I'm here not only as a resident of the Garden District, but also as someone who's worked as a residential design professional for over 30 years. And I've seen so many historic neighborhoods go into decline because of, and it normally starts like this. You know, there's a special permit issued, and it sets the precedent, and that's what concerns me the most, is the next people are going to want to come, and then they're going to want another R34, et cetera, and pretty soon the neighborhood is littered with apartment complexes, and the integrity of the neighborhood declines. You know, I have seen this happen way too often in neighborhoods I've worked in California and other states, that these wonderful old neighborhoods lose their identity and lose what makes them attractive because of, you know, something starting, what could be starting here. I was at the last meeting, and one of the things that I noticed that bothered me was it seemed like the presentation made by the architect on behalf of the developer was very, very vague. I mean, they didn't talk about what kinds of apartments these were going to be. He said, I think, I'm paraphrasing slightly, but that he suspected that these would be relatively high-end apartments. To me, that says there's no parameters that really have been set as to what we can expect from this. The way it's zoned now, they can put in 9 apartments. Why not put in 9 apartments that are larger rather than 17 smaller ones? Something that would work for the neighborhood. I think people would embrace that. The building that's there now, certainly that's not reflective of our neighborhood. It's a commercial building, commercial brick building that relates to nothing around it. If the developer and the architect, you know, assuming these are the folks that actually are going to do it rather than just are trying to sell it by gaining this designation, if they were to put in 9 units and improve, you know, make that building so that it looks like part of the neighborhood and enhances the quality of the neighborhood rather than tries to change it, I think the people of the Garden District would embrace it wholeheartedly. That's what I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Kevin Kavanaugh is neutral and wishes to testify.
Opposed.
Oh, okay. Opposed.
Kevin Kavanaugh, 612 East Coeur d'Alene.
Do you swear that the testimony you are about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for your time. I'm new to the area, like many of these other people have talked about. It's the character and the charm of this community that drew me there. I've substantially increased my property. Anybody walking by my house has seen projects after projects of improvement and building the community up. I'm also a retired professional firefighter. I have responded to a call in a call building with all the electrical wires in the bottom and with no residences over the top or built around it. And I would, as a professional firefighter, have been very scared for those residents, especially in an after-hours fire or any kind of an issue that was in there. I don't believe you should have a mixed-use commercial with some sort of secure or potential of problems to happen under people and their families. I also feel that it is completely out of character, and I don't know if I can ask or get an answer to this. The only time I've heard 2 stories has been by your employee. I was at the meeting, the Planning Commission meeting, and they showed a picture of 2 stories. But when you start talking heights of 45 feet, it could be 3 or 4 stories. I agree with the other gentleman up here who spoke and said that, you know, could it be 4 stories and a flat roof? I don't quite know how you're going to fit that many units on 2 stories into that footprint that's on that property. But I would, if I could get an answer to that, I would like to know that it's going to be limited to 2 stories. And I would just like to reiterate that, in my opinion, the historic charm that brought me to this town, this community, it does not fit. So,
Right, thank you.
thank you.
Next on this list, I have Richard, 1107 East Sherman, has said he's in opposition, did not check whether he wanted to testify or not testify. Richard, are you here?
Pass.
Okay. Next on the list, we have Wendy Wilson in opposition, and she wishes to testify. Wendy, are you here?
I'm Wendy Wilson at 519 East Indiana.
Do you swear that the testimony you are about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Thank you.
Unlike many of my neighbors who are new to the neighborhood, I am not. Our family is 7 generations Coeur d'Alene, and it's been fun to watch Coeur d'Alene through the stories of my grandparents as well as the stories now we're telling our kids and grandchildren. But having said that too, I've been thrilled with the kind of progress we've seen in Coeur d'Alene, unlike some of maybe my parents or grandparents. I have appreciated this council. I've appreciated the mayor in the last 10 years, 20 years, how they've guided the development of Coeur d'Alene, have watched over that, have made it, I think, a wonderful place to live, and I'm grateful for that. And I think probably where many of us are coming from now, in a sense, asking for that sense of intervention, where you really have worked to balance growth and progress with protecting the heritage, the legacy, the history, the natural resources of the community, which is what was so much of, was it 2030 was about, that kind of language. And I think really that's what we're talking about here too. Again, most of us are not against progress. We're not against an eight unit thing there at the property in question. But we are concerned about the historical character of the neighborhood, which is a gem of our community. And honestly, our community really does see ourselves, someone mentioned, as ambassadors, as hosts. And I think the point I'd like to make is not just who's living here and related to traffic density and parking. It's not just related to those of us who live here or who may be living here, but all of the community is coming to our neighborhood. All of the world is coming to our neighborhood. We have bigger density issues than just residential density. So I think our community, our neighborhood, is in a bit of a special situation that I think we would ask for special consideration because we're dealing with special challenges because of where our neighborhood is. You know, recreational density, people coming down to certainly use the lake, the resort, McEwen Park, which I love. Centennial Trail. Just today, I walked home, and there was a full-size tour bus parked two houses from my house, and then there was a 15 person biking bus where they must have let people go on the Centennial Trail, and then parked over by us because they didn't want to pay to park downtown. And then an SUV checking into the Airbnb right across the street from me. So, and we're okay with all that, but I think we're requesting some help from you to manage all the density we get educationally, arts, all the wine bars and the live music and all stuff which we love, but we have more people in our community than just those of us that live here that we are hosting and that we are dealing with, not just during big events, but day to day. The world is coming to our neighborhood, and we need help managing and being good hosts and being hospitable, which we want to be. So.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Next on the list, we have Tricia Dye, who is in opposition and wishes to testify. Come on up.
Tricia Dye, 416 North 6th Street.
Okay, do you swear that the testimony you are about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Thank you.
Good evening, Mayor and council members. I wanted to say that this has been a very interesting process. I've never done this before. I've never been in a small town where I was able to come to these meetings and get this, but I've gotten to meet a lot of neighbors. We have all been talking about this and doing petitions, getting out there and really, and I read in the comprehension plan that this is part of what you've planned for us to do, is to be advocates for our neighborhood and get together and you know, talk with each other and really, you know, be there for our neighborhood. And we have a very special area, our garden district, the historical heart of Coeur d'Alene. I love these titles. I think it makes you feel really special that you're living in such a wonderful place. As stated in the plan, we have important elements to preserve. The plan was written to, quote, protect these special areas and help them thrive, to provide quality neighborhoods, protect existing neighborhoods. And the home environment part, goal 3, states that this, Coeur d'Alene is obligated to preserve the character and respect the history of the city as seen in the old neighborhoods, while encouraging a diversity of design in the new neighborhoods, and to make it a great place to live. And so far, this has been the most wonderful place I've ever lived. And I've lived a long time. So on page 39 of the plan, the base map shows that this area is an, quote, established, stable area. I think that was one of the slides up there, where the character of the neighborhood has been established and should be maintained and not expected to change. The intensity of the R34 is not appropriate for this area. It was meant to be the transitional area, which Kate has, Dr. Wood was describing. This area is also not served. Oh, I think she also did the arterial road. I just wanted to mention about 6th Street, or 7th Street, is a residential area. There are houses on both sides of the street. And so you're going through a residential area. I don't think that is considered like 3rd and 4th, where 3rd and 4th there are businesses on both sides. The Innovation Den and the old Elks building have been reworked to make very desirable office space, and they have been sold out, from what I understand, even before they've been finished. This building site that we're talking about could easily be reworked, I think, to become something like that, so that they're very desirable office spaces downstairs, and with the housing upstairs of 9 units. It's already zoned for the mixed use in this residential area. That's very unique for our area.
Continue as long as you'd like.
Thank you. So, you know, I think he will get commercial and residential income from R17, and it will help conform to the surrounding neighborhoods. The small town, old town neighborhood feeling attracted me and many people to Coeur d'Alene. If we change the zoning in the Garden District, the historical heart, we will lose this attractive part of our city. So I think that's all everybody else said. Oh, I just wanted to point out too that there is a comprehensive plan layout for the infill areas, and this is nowhere near those. So I would hope that you would look again at this, the comprehension plan, and I was happy to hear that we could all be on that or part of that, because I find this very interesting now that I'm retired. I would just hope that we can maintain our beautiful part of Coeur d'Alene in the identity of this established neighborhood. Thank you very much.
Thank you. The last one that I have on my list is Sharon Kearns is in opposition and wishes to testify.
She just popped right up.
Please state your name and address for the record, please.
Sharon Kearns, 510 North 7th Street.
Okay. Do you swear that the testimony you are about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Thank you.
If you were not at the last public hearing for this, what we are now calling the Pandora project, I live right across the street from this property and will be more directly affected by it than most of you. I will try to express my concerns for myself and the neighborhood more effectively this time. Since the Zoning Commission obviously felt the need to court or reward this developer with a zoning change and open the door to Pandora's box in the Garden District, I feel compelled to open another door. Free permit parking on 7th Street for the 4 homes across the street from the Pandora project. 2 of those homes have nowhere else to park except for 7th Street. If you insist on granting special favor to this developer, you can grant us free parking permits so we don't have to be in constant conflict with the 9, 17, whatever the number of apartments is, or the 3 to 4, 5 new businesses that would be directly across the street from us. I don't have to be a parking analyst to know this. I've lived across the street from this building for more than 10 years and need only to be moderately observant to figure out this will be an issue. Yes, 7th Street is a public street, so anyone can park anywhere. But the single-family dwellings already there try to be courteous to each other and park only in front of their own houses, including letting friends know where to park or not park to park. When the Social Security office was in Pandora's building, there was plenty of parking for their patrons every business day. But human nature took over, and most of the patrons took the path of least resistance and avoided the parking lot and parked on 7th Street or Wallace, directly in front of me and my neighbors' houses, sometimes even blocking our little driveway or the alley. This creates conflicts which will be compounded by the fact that now there will be all these new residences, density with people parking not just during 9 to 5 business days for 20 minutes or an hour, but potentially 24 hours a day, potentially not moving the whole weekend. Because, hey, if it's open, it's easier than parking in the parking lot. I can also see that parking lot every time I open my front door.
Go ahead.
Thank you. And again, I do not have to be a parking analyst to know when everyone is home and friends come into play, there is not enough parking. There will be conflict. My husband asked one lady why she didn't use the parking lot. And she said, this spot, your house looks so pretty and safe. While flattering, that's annoying and stressful, because it also means we have to roam the neighborhood looking for another spot to park, and for us to feel safe when that person moves, try to go get our car and move it back in front of our home. We weed, water, and groom the verge and pay our property tax the week before Christmas every year, and though we only have a small house, we've worked damn hard to fix it up and would like to be able to park in front of our own house. Last meeting, someone made the ridiculous comment that this project would mean less traffic on 7th. We're not fooled by that either. By the way, it's been pointed out since I wrote this down, but 3rd Street is one way, 4th Street is one way, 7th is not. What no one else has seemed to notice too is exactly how many bicycles, skateboards, and strollers and dog walkers are constantly going up and down 7th Street. I don't think you realize how many skateboards are going up and down that street every day and all evening, for that matter. I live across from this property, I know. Also, sewage concerns were raised by people last meeting, and the Planning Commission went ahead and voted for this zoning change before addressing whether the system can handle the volume of toilet flushing, shower taking, clothes washing that 9 to 15 additional units will create. I don't trust that the proper research has been done, and I want to be on record now, so maybe, just maybe, I have some sort of recourse later if a problem on this issue arises, and I'm not left holding the bag. I have to have our pipes scoped often, and my neighbor had to have a backflow preventer so his basement would not fill with sewage. All of the neighbors are concerned about property value, that this density and number of new units will create. And what happens when the grandfathered utilities in the basement are moved? What goes in there after that? More offices, underground residences, a speakeasy? What about that? And now that you've opened this door, what happens when the wedding chapel across the street decides it wants to be apartments and multiple businesses? Are we going to make an exception for that too? And aren't you lucky? I'm out of the 3x5 cards.
Thank you, Sharon.
Okay, so is there anyone else that would like to testify that did not sign up on the sheet? We can get them signed up.
Is that okay?
Did you sign up on the sheet?
I did.
Okay, yeah, come on up.
Unpass.
You passed before. We'll let you come on up.
Unpass. It's a new one.
We'll unpass you. And your name?
Richard Price, 714 East Wallace.
Okay.
You swear that the testimony you are about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God.
I do.
Thank you.
I'll just make it real quick. I thought it was important. I got up here and publicly stated my opposition to the density change down there for a lot of different reasons, but they've already been stated. But thank you very much.
Okay. All right. Thank you. And so I believe we have one other gentleman that would like to testify.
Yes, I was late coming in, but I just got the sign-up sheet now.
Oh, okay. You want to sign that sheet? I'll come get it from him.
You used it all.
Please state your name and address, sir.
Wayne Sweeney, 701 East Foster Avenue.
You swear that the testimony you are about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God.
I affirm.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, I testified or didn't testify, but I made comments and raised questions at the commission hearing. At that time, I was neutral on this proposal. Since then, I've discovered that some of the information I had been provided with going into that meeting was not entirely correct, and I also had a chance to do some further research. Dr. Wood's presentation was very comprehensive. I'm not going to repeat some of the arguments that she made. I thought that her evidence was very compelling and urge you to consider it. I do want to focus on one point in the ordinance that she mentioned, 17.05330 on the R34 residential requirements. The ordinance is clear that in order to warrant consideration, the subject property must, in addition to having the required designation of R17, C17, C17L, or LM, meet certain requirements. And on material points, those are that the subject property be in proximity to an arterial as defined in the transportation plan. And Dr. Wood and some others have addressed that. The staff report responded on that point that the arterial in close proximity is Lakeside Avenue. As Councilman Gookin pointed out earlier this evening, people from the neighborhood don't drive south on 7th Street for shopping and that type of thing. They drive north. That's where Albertsons is, that's where Safeway is, that's where Midtown is, that's where hardware stores are, that's where Costco is. People drive north more than they drive south. They drive south when they return to the neighborhood. So Lakeside Avenue is not an appropriate arterial to consider, even if it did meet the requirement of close proximity. Now, as was discussed earlier, close proximity is not defined in the transportation plan or in the comprehensive plan or in the ordinance. However, the ordinance itself gives guidance as to what close proximity should be in considering a R34 residential zone change, and that is that it has to be sufficient to handle the amount of traffic generated by the request in addition to that of the surrounding neighborhood, and a project and accessing street must be designed in such a way as to minimize vehicular traffic through adjacent neighborhoods, residential neighborhoods. That has not been addressed anywhere in the record here. Again, somebody looked at the map and said, well, Lakeside Avenue is close, that's good enough. It's not, it doesn't comply with the ordinance. And as Dr. Wood pointed out, the other point on which this project fails to meet the requirements of the ordinance is Part B, where the district is appropriate as a transition between R17 and commercial industrial. We don't have any intensive commercial industrial uses adjacent to our neighborhood. So I urge the council to find balance here. I don't think, I'm personally not opposed to multifamily units. However, I have big concerns about the doubling the density for this small parcel. In the event that the council nevertheless upholds the designation of the property to R34, we would request the council to require approval of the design committee in an effort to find a compatible appearance and design of the project. I lived next to the Tudor brick building multifamily unit on Garden in 5th Street. We lived north of that across the alley for 13 years, and it blends in very well with the neighborhood, so it can be done. I have no further comments.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, now the applicant, Mr. Stauffer, would have an opportunity.
Name and address for the record, please.
Dick Stauffer, 601 Front Avenue.
Do you swear that the testimony you are about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Thank you.
Mayor and Council, I'm going to give you a little presentation similar to what we gave at the Planning Commission. We've added some stuff at the end based on the testimony, which was very similar to what we've heard tonight. This is pretty much a recap of what we heard 6 weeks ago or whenever that meeting took place. I want to preface my presentation with you appreciate the passion and the sincerity that everything is going on with, but a lot of this is given like we don't exist. We're on 6 lots with a 7,400 square foot building that's been there since 1963, and it is what it is. We have 2,400 square feet of Frontier gear in our basement, which is not going away anytime soon unless technology changes, which it might. But it is there to stay, and it's not like we're just going to vaporize here. Are we interested in making a return on our investment? Absolutely. That's part of what we do, and do we apologize for being nice guys or good developers? Absolutely not. But I think you'll see that we've got a legitimate request. And I think when we went into this, we thought that having been grandfathered in commercially and being allowed to build the 9 units, that maybe going an all residential project might be preferable and get rid of the commercial component. Not entirely, because we've got some stuff that we've got to deal with in the basement. We thought that might be favorable to the neighborhood, and that seems to be a little naive. But, as was mentioned by a couple of the presenters, that we could certainly do the mixed use, put the 9 units over the top, and ironically, the building would look bulk-wise very much the same. It would be 2 floors, residential over commercial. And the size, bulk, traffic, weight on the sewer, water, all that would be no different, and that's an entitled use right now. We wouldn't be here, but we thought maybe using one more tool in the toolbox that the city has made available to developers, that we thought that might give us an option to do that. With that, and we've worked with city staff for 40 years, and we find them to be competent and reliable. For what that's worth. This is a little slide sequence that we went through last time, and we think it's interesting, it's a dynamic. You recognize this is downtown. There's our site in the Google aerial. There's your CBD, I guess we call it downtown core these days, in the red outline. So as in, I like to say, planning 101, you have your downtown core in this high density area, and then immediately next to that you have a medium density, and you worked out into the single family. This is true in New York City and Coeur d'Alene, Idaho, and Athol, Idaho. This is kind of the way it works, and this is very organic development. There we are, a little more close up, and I think that the thing you glean from this slide is that this is the subject right here, and the old school building is right here. It's been called the yoga studio, or the old school. And the wedding chapel, the old Methodist church, is down here. The Social Security building has a footprint of about 7,400 feet. The wedding chapel, very similar, and the school building closer to 5. So there are 3 pretty good sized buildings that bookend each other right here. There's a church, and the 40-some feet is an accurate depiction of those. And we were amenable to the 45-foot ceiling that the Planning Commission, that was part of the discussion. We said we thought that was appropriate for the neighborhood. Our 17 is already at 45. We saw no need to go over that. So we were amenable to that condition. 7th Street, the collector, the not arterial that goes here. And right now, these are all existing, the asphalt is there, the building is there, the street trees are there, the sidewalks, the curbs are there. The building has 3 access points down off of Wallace Avenue, off of Garden, and off the alley on there. And this was another thing that was talked about at length, and at various points, various presenters all had objections to all these points of entry. And I think we offered to staff and to the commission that we were open to talking about all of them, but they seemed to want them all gone. So we continue to say something that was good for the neighborhood and allowed us to survive. We're open to discussion on that sort of thing. The wedding chapel, once again, is referenced before. The mixed-use building, north-south. And then I'm going to flag that one right there, because at the last, Shelley Bennett is the owner of this house right here. She lives in Moscow. She's an absentee owner. She testified on our behalf. And so the 3 buildings most direct, and I'm present company of the lady who testified on 7th. She's an immediate neighbor as well, but have not raised any specific opposition for us. This is just an interesting slide showing the context of the site. You've seen most of these. Once again, since 1963, the 7,400 square foot building, along with 55 or 51, depending on how you stripe it, parking space, that's all there. We're not asphalting the world. We're not taking down all the big trees. We're good neighbors. We maintain our lawn. We've got an irrigation system. We've got some heavy shrubbery, internally on the fence lines. It is in the middle of a residential neighborhood, but it's fairly friendly. We got the parking, existing parking here. We've got the street trees that exist down there. You can see the bulk roughed in with the school building and the church at the bottom of the slide. These once again are, if you look closely, the bottom is relatively unchanged. Those are the openings that exist in that building. It's a brick building. It was, once again, built in the 60s. It was meant to be an office building. And so, without raising it and starting over again, there's some character elements of the building that this is very much concept as we move forward. But that shows this shows kind of an all residential project, which is kind of where we were headed here. Additional density from this special use permit would soften the historical commercial use in a predominantly residential context while staying compatible, as we see it, with the zoning and comp plan goals. We all know that the downtown housing reach is a real thing. It's not going away. Additional units continue to come online. There continues to be demand. And not just in the really high-end stuff, the stuff that is a little bit more affordable. We can repurpose existing improvements and infrastructure without additional municipal burden. This is something, as your staff has said, there's nothing that needs to be built here in order to accommodate this development. And we throw this in, and people poo-poo this, but there's an enhancement of the tax base by a factor of 2 if something like this goes forward. We think that's worth mentioning. As we prepared to respond to the appellant, it occurred to us that here's your garden district, the definition. Sherman, what is that? What's the North Street there?
Harrison?
Montana? Not quite that far. 4th to 11th, Sherman to, is my historian here? Montana? Okay, so that's Sherman to Montana, 4th to 11th. Once again, you can see the site as it sits in the garden district. There we are. And so we took, as part of the title search that you're required to do when you do your application, you end up with all the city maps and the addresses. And so we went back through, at this stage, and pulled the addresses down. This is off the city GIS. And just start plugging these addresses around. And this is kind of the area that's just the immediate around the site here. And there's your zoning map, once again with all the addresses on it. The dark green is the R8, the yellow the R17, and the light green is the R12. And zoning for dummies, R8 is one wet house on a lot. That's a 5,000-foot standard city lot, one house. R17 or R16 would be a duplex on a city lot. R34, R32 would be a fourplex on a city lot. That's kind of, if you can imagine the zoning there. So anyways, you add these addresses on around here. Out Wallace, 3 units. This is as-built zoning to R23. 5 units, as-built zoning R29. This is in the R8. As-built zoning R3, R19. As-built zoning fourplex R31. As-built zoning 10 units R40. As-built zoning, and the pictures of the units are actually showing up in the lower left-hand corner there.
What are you basing the data, the value on?
The number of units there based on the number of property that it's on.
On the property size.
Yeah, and that's also on these, comes off right off these maps. So it's nothing that we developed. This is right off the city data. 5 units R38. 4 units R31. 4 units R31, once again in the R8. And then we took it one further, and another thing that we're required to do with our application is identify all the non-owner occupied units. The tax bill goes to whoever owns the lot, and then assumably they don't live there. So anyway, these are all non-owner occupied. So I'm going to go back to my original slide and presentation here, is that this is organic development. This is, and I'm not picking on anybody here. This is, you can do this in the Fork Grounds, you can do it in Sanders Beach, you can do it everywhere. That this informal development, called room rental or redevelopment internally with multiple addresses. A lot of it, some of it's done a long time ago. I think we cited the old, the Tudor up at, on 5th Street. You know, it's been here forever, but it's up there in the R8. This is a real typical organic development in these residential neighborhoods, but it's not as pure as you might think. We really thought in the initial application that we were doing something that we thought was ultimately a softening of a traditional commercial use into a mostly residential use. And it's not been met that way. I think the entitlement is to build the 9 units over the commercial property. All the asphalt's there, the parking's there, the building services are there, the building's set to accommodate that. You've heard from your staff that says that's not a burden on the arterials or the services. We were reaching for another tool in the toolbox to give ourselves some options. Any questions?
Questions for Mr. Stauffer? Questions? Doesn't look like it.
Okay,
thank you. So the final piece of this is we will give the appellant has an opportunity for a brief summary. Dr. Wood, do you want to come up for just a brief summary?
There's just a few things that I would like to say after hearing the testimony and then the presentation by Miller Stauffer. We can get lost in a lot of small details and personal anecdotes, but there's a few black and white things that alone I feel support that this should be blocked from an R17 to an R34. R34 is meant as a transition zone to the commercial from R17. As you can see by this designation, this is not a commercial zone. This is an R8 neighborhood with current zoning keeping it into an R8 neighborhood. The other thing that needs to be stated is the arterial and the violation of the code. I think that the presentation that was given shows that City Code 1705330 has been violated by this special use permit. And the lack of the use of an arterial and how that negatively affects the neighborhood alone, those 2 points should steer the council to reverse the decision of the Planning Committee. Thank you.
Thank you. At this time, we will close the public testimony portion of this, and we will look for council action and discussion. I think, Woody, you should start us off.
You know, this is pretty cool when all you guys stay up this late to go through this. It says a lot about all of you. The comments have been great. It's good old kumbaya. I was thinking back to your neighborhood about 40 years ago when it wasn't cool, when it didn't have a fence around it, calling it a district. It was rough, it was raggedy, it was blue collar. It was folks that used to be loggers and mill guys, and those jobs went away. And thank goodness you guys came along to make it cool again. Because when we do the comp plan back in those days, it wasn't about specifics. It was about general feel good, let people try doing different things to make it work. And I think Mr. Stauffer's presentation, just showing you how mixed the neighborhoods are, shows that history. And I think that's important. And you guys have obviously made it real clear, to me anyway, that that's important to you, the good side of the history. I remember the not-so-good side. I did want to ask the sewer guy about our sewer. I know that there's not trees coming into our line, maybe into your laterals, but I doubt it's in our lines. So I would step up for the sewer guy because I'm a kind of a sewer guy. The traffic impact, you guys hit all the buttons. I think the biggest thing for me was the reality of Dr. Wood's two things. The street always bothered me, 7th Street. I travel it a lot. I live up above Harrison, so I come down 7th Street and look out for skateboarders. But you made that comment about the R34 being appropriate and how it's been used in the past, and I think that's very valid. It's very valid. You showed us pretty clearly how it's normally worked. What we try and do here is usually try and help people create new ideas and new things. You guys are in your single-family homes, and that's great, but there's a whole lot of people that are moving here that are retired looking for apartments. I hate to say that word because it seems like everybody's against it. But you remember when you were 18 and 20, you lived in an apartment. You had to. That's what you could afford. You had roommates. I mean, that was life. That's how you learned to kind of get along with people and learn that you want to have your own home someday. So I appreciate what you guys have said tonight, and I'm finding myself in support of what you're saying. I was hoping that Stauffer would come in with a cool new design that looked like one of your houses, those old funky things. But I can tell you, people don't have to build them to look like cool houses from the past. They can build them pretty much any way they want. For some of you guys that haven't been here long, that's why you're in Idaho. You got choices here. And we try and let you guys do what you want. It's your money, it's your property, and that's important. I do hope Mr. Stauffer can stick with it. I'm going to stick with the old school. I think it's appropriate for him to do the 9. I'm not too worried about him making money. That's his call. But I think if that can keep the peace for a while and not set precedents for trying to do crazy stuff in the Garden District, I'm okay with that. So I do appreciate what you guys have done. You've come together. If nothing better, you should have a big party. Everybody knows everybody now. So thank you for showing up and giving us your insight.
Dan.
And being gentle. It's okay.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I'm going to take issue with what it was reported that Mr. Rumpler said. Has actually been my beliefs on council that zoning is designed to preserve neighborhoods. And that's what I think when I think about zoning changes. I also want to remind council that this is a zone. This is not a project. And we had a project a few years ago, Lilac Glen, that came in, and it was in an R3, and they were going to put in a C17 because it was senior housing. And we're all like, oh, senior housing, well, that's so nice. Well, that fell through, so now we have a C17 zone in the middle of an R3. And it doesn't belong there, but, you know, it's there. So just to remind council, this is a zone change. And question for Sean, and you can just nod yes or no. If this thing was to maintain, if it was to, the conditions were the same, and the height limit is set at 45 by the Planning Commission, is there a process available that someone can come in the future and extend that height? I guess this is not a yes or no question.
In the very recent past, they could. And there is a portion of our code that would allow extensions above maximum height of up to 15 feet to access rooftops. And that had been abused in the past. In our most recent, in which council actually passed recently, they took that availability away. So currently, you cannot go over that height.
Okay. So, yeah, yes.
Could I ask a question while he's here?
Sure.
Okay. This whole thing about arterial or not an arterial, and you know,
proximity.
And actually, from my point of view, I pretty much picture 7th and 3rd and 4th the same. Yeah, some are 2-lane one way, but it looks pretty much like the same size street to me. But But the whole thing of arterial, did you say in your part in the beginning that there really isn't a definition, or, I mean, drill down on that. How big of a deal is that arterial definition?
Right. So I'm not a traffic engineer, and I'm not the city engineer, so I ultimately am not going to be able to answer the question about arterials. What I can talk about is proximity. So our code defines adjacent, which does not mean abutting. And so abutting, to me, in what our definition is it actually shares the same line. So to be annexed into the city of Coeur d'Alene, you have to be contiguous with or abutting city limits. You can't annex something that's removed from. Proximity doesn't mean you have to be on that line. It just means you have to be close. So in my professional opinion, if you're within walking distance, that is close proximity. That's my personal feeling and professional opinion. That is a quarter of a mile to half of a mile is walking distance. That's how someone is willing to walk to a bus stop or to go get groceries or something like that.
And the follow-up on the same question, Sean, the slide that you showed us was the KMPO definition of an arterial, but the street was defined by KMPO as not a major or minor, but an arterial?
A collector.
A collector. And so the code refers to arterial, but the KMPO calls it a collector.
Correct. That is what 7th Street is. That is actually abutting, with touching.
Okay. And the closest arterial then is Lakeside.
Yes.
Okay.
Dan, I'll come back to you because you've never had only one point. You've had to have something else.
Well, I just want to make a motion.
Oh, okay, you go ahead.
Well, I think Ron wants to talk.
Oh, Ron, I'm sorry. You could
I was going to make a motion.
Oh, I get to
there
make
you
the motion
go.
first then.
Go ahead, Ron. We can have discussion afterwards.
Now, can we make a simple motion just to accept the appeal?
Yes, yes, you can do that.
Okay, I'm going to make a motion then that we accept the appeal, and that's it.
Second.
So,
And I would add that this is to reverse the Planning Commission's approval of the special use permit.
yes, yeah, okay. So Ron's motion is to reverse the council or the planning commission's approval, seconded by Dan Gookin. Further discussion. Kiki.
Well, I had some comments. I actually used to live in the Garden District as well, and I lived in a house that had multiple units in it. I lived on 7th Street, corner of, and loved my neighborhood. I thought, my questions started out regarding the commercial piece of this because I thought that this particular building, as I drive 7th Street still regularly, is sort of an albatross to the neighborhood. It's sort of, it doesn't fit in the way it is right now. It doesn't, it's been vacant for a long time. It's been multiple purposes, and I thought this project might be a way to move it into something that would be more compatible. So I'm looking at a lot of fear and a lot of pressure that have been there for multiple years in this particular district of how to preserve it for the folks of you and the 155 who signed the document. But there's a lot of folks that have changed the nature of that neighborhood in the last 10 years, in the last 15 years. So I want to support this historic district. I am a little disappointed because I think the project was judged on its spec, and I was a little disappointed in kind of the hurled comments. But I can understand that the fear and that passion can make people be very suspicious, and I would hope that the neighborhood could come back together. I'm wishing that I'm hoping that those comments can either encourage the developer to go back and try it again through planning and zoning, or that we can, I don't buy into the arterial thing. I think it's a north-south no matter what. I think that if there was a way that the project could come back to the Planning Commission with some tweaks, they might have to start over. But I'm disappointed that there wasn't more willingness to work on moving something that could change that building to something more compatible into the neighborhood on this go-around.
Any other further discussion?
Just one more thing. Thank you so much for showing up. Good government requires active citizens, and I appreciate that you were all here and took the time out of your day to come and tell us what you think. That's really cool. Thank you.
Any other discussion? Ron?
Yeah, I kind of live in that neighborhood, not exactly in the Garden District, but down the street a ways into the Person Field District. And I think that my neighborhood is beginning to change too. And I'm waiting for the time that it really changes a lot. And then I'm going to be up here screaming and yelling too. And I don't blame you at all. Good job.
All right, any other discussion? So Renata, if you would do the roll call, please.
Can I just ask one clarification to legal? When they make the motion to reverse the decision, do they need to do new findings?
No, I think they're just reversing the decision that's been appealed.
Thank you. I'm ready for roll call.
Roll call, please.
Okay. English?
Yes.
Ettinger?
Yes.
Miller?
Yes.
McEvers?
Yes.
Kukin?
Yes.
Motion carried. And I want to thank everyone. You're obviously passionate, but you are very professional. And I think that it was a good hearing. I agree with Dan that it was a way that government works for all the citizens. So thank you very much. And now, Woody, how about this motion?
I would like to move forward. No other business, we be adjourned.
Second.
Motion and a second to adjourn. All those in favor?
Aye.
We are adjourned.